She inherited Elvis Presley's abandoned estate for just $1, thinking it was nothing but worthless ruins and broken memories. But when this struggling pregnant mother discovered the secret tunnel hidden beneath cracked basement floors, what she found inside changed everything. $200 million worth of treasures the king had hidden from the world, and a truth powerful enough to shake an entire industry. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will absolutely blow your mind. And please drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel around the world. Now let's begin. Richard Hayes slammed his fist on the mahogany desk so hard that his coffee cup jumped and splattered dark liquid across legal documents worth millions. "What do you mean someone accessed the property?" His voice cracked with fury, veins bulging in his neck as he stared at the trembling associate standing before him. "Sir, our surveillance team reported movement at the Collierville estate this morning. A woman. She had documentation. She walked right through the front door like she owned the place." "Who is she?" The associate swallowed hard. "We're still running her plates, but the car is registered to someone in Nashville. We should have a name within the hour." Richard stood slowly, his 6'3" frame casting a shadow across the desk. At 62 years old, he had spent 4 decades protecting the Presley estate's interests. He had buried secrets, destroyed evidence, and ruined lives to keep certain truths from ever seeing daylight. And now, some nobody had waltzed onto a property that should have remained forgotten. "My father searched for that estate for 15 years before he died," Richard said quietly, his voice more dangerous for its softness. He knew Elvis had hidden something worth more than Graceland itself. He died without finding it. "Sir, we don't even know if the rumors are true. The hidden vault could just be a legend." Richard's hand shot out and grabbed the associate by his tie, yanking him forward until their faces were inches apart. "It's not a legend. I've seen the construction receipts. I've interviewed the contractors' families. Elvis spent $3 million in 1974 building something underground at that property. $3 million doesn't buy a legend." He released the associate, who stumbled backward, gasping, "Find out who this woman is, find out what she knows, and find out if she's accessed anything beneath that house." "And if she has..." Richard's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. "Then we make sure she understands that some secrets are worth killing for." The associate's face went pale. "Sir, you can't be serious. If anything happens to her and it traces back to us, I didn't say we would kill her. I said we would make her understand." Richard straightened his tie, his composure returning like a mask sliding into place. "There are many ways to destroy a person without leaving a mark. Financial ruin, legal nightmares, threats to people she loves." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. "We have a name. Sarah Mitchell. 28 years old. Works at a laundromat in Nashville." He paused, reading further, and a slow smile spread across his face. "And she's 7 months pregnant. No husband, no family, no resources." He looked up at his associate with something like satisfaction. "Perfect. She has everything to lose and nothing to fight with. Get me everything on her. Bank records, medical files, employment history. I want to know her weaknesses before she even knows we exist." "How far do we go, sir?" Richard Hayes turned to face the window, looking out over Memphis, the city Elvis had called home. "As far as necessary. That fortune has been waiting underground for 47 years. It belongs to the estate, it belongs to us, and I will destroy anyone who tries to take it." 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Mitchell had no idea that powerful men were about to target her life. She was just trying to survive another day. The alarm on Sarah's phone screamed at 4:30 in the morning, and she slapped it silent with a groan that came from somewhere deep in her exhausted bones. 7 months pregnant, alone, broke. Another day in paradise. She rolled onto her side, which was the only position that didn't make her back feel like it was being stabbed with hot knives, and stared at the water stain on the ceiling of her trailer. The stain had been growing for 3 weeks. She couldn't afford to fix it. She couldn't afford to fix anything. The baby kicked hard right against her bladder. Okay, Sarah muttered, struggling to sit up. "I'm moving. Give Mama a minute." The trailer was freezing. The heating had died again, sometime during the night, and her breath came out in visible puffs as she shuffled to the tiny bathroom. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror and winced. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Cheekbones too sharp from skipping meals so she could afford prenatal vitamins. Hair that hadn't been properly washed in days because the water heater was temperamental and cold showers in December were not an option for a pregnant woman. "You look like death," she told her reflection. Her reflection didn't argue. She got dressed in layers because that was the only way to stay warm. Maternity jeans from the church donation bin, a sweater Maria had given her, 2 hoodies, a coat that no longer zipped over her belly. Breakfast was half a granola bar and tap water. She'd saved the other half for lunch. The walk to the bus stop took 15 minutes, and by the time she got there, her feet were numb and her lower back was screaming. The bus was late, which meant standing in the cold for another 20 minutes, which meant her ankles would be swollen by noon. A man in a warm car drove past without stopping. A woman with a coffee cup walked by without looking. The world moved around Sarah Mitchell like she was invisible, and most days that was exactly how she felt. The bus finally arrived at 6:45. Sarah climbed aboard, dropped her fare in the box, and found a seat near the back. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about the stack of bills on her kitchen counter. Electric pass due. Water final notice. Rent due in 5 days. Hospital bills, don't even think about it. She had exactly $43 in her bank account. Her next paycheck was in 4 days. The math didn't work. The math never worked. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, almost like a reassurance. "I know, sweetheart." Sarah whispered, her hand on her belly. "Mama's going to figure something out. She always does." But the truth was, she was running out of ways to figure things out. She had sold everything she could sell. She had begged for every extra shift. She had cut every expense to the bone and then cut some more, and it still wasn't enough. The bus lurched to her stop, and Sarah hauled herself up, her body protesting every movement. 3 more blocks to walk, 8 more hours of work, then 3 blocks back, then the bus, then the walk home, and tomorrow she would do it all again. Sunshine Laundromat was already warm when she pushed through the door, and Sarah nearly cried with relief at the heat. Maria was behind the counter sorting quarters, and she looked up with a smile that immediately turned to concern. "Girl, you look terrible. Did you eat breakfast?" "I had a granola bar." "Half a granola bar," Maria corrected, because Maria knew her too well. "I can see the other half poking out of your pocket. Sit down. I'm making you eggs." "Maria, you don't have to." "I'm not asking. Sit." Sarah sat because her feet hurt too much to argue and because Maria's eggs were the best thing she'd eaten in weeks. The break room microwave was ancient, but Maria had brought a hot plate from home specifically for mornings like this. "You need to eat more," Maria said, cracking eggs into a pan. "You're eating for 2 now." "I'm eating for 1.5 on a budget for 0. "That's not funny." "It's not meant to be." Maria slid a plate of scrambled eggs across the table along with 2 pieces of toast and a glass of orange juice that Sarah definitely couldn't afford to replace. "Eat, don't argue, and don't give me that look." Sarah ate. She tried to eat slowly to savor it, but she was so hungry that the food disappeared in minutes. When she finished, she felt almost human again. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That's what friends are for." Maria sat down across from her. "Now, tell me the truth. How bad is it?" Sarah considered lying. She'd gotten good at lying over the past few months, at pretending everything was fine, at pasting on a smile and saying she was managing. But Maria was the closest thing she had to family, and she was tired of pretending. "I don't know if I can make rent this month, and even if I do, I don't know how I'm going to pay for the hospital when the baby comes. I don't have insurance, I don't have savings, I don't have anyone." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed her hands against her eyes, refusing to cry. She had cried enough. Crying didn't pay bills. Maria reached across the table and took her hand. "You have me, and we're going to figure this out. Together." "So, Dr. Dittis, how the math doesn't work, Maria. I've tried everything." "Then we'll try something we haven't thought of yet." Maria squeezed her hand. "You're not alone, Sarah. I know it feels that way, but you're not." The front door chimed before Sarah could respond, and both women looked up. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, thin, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 months. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His shoes gleamed. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. He looked completely absurdly out of place in a laundromat. "Can I help you?" Sarah called out, automatically switching to her customer service voice. The man walked toward her slowly, his eyes taking in her pregnant belly, her worn clothes, her exhausted face. Something flickered in his expression. Calculation, maybe, or recognition. "Are you Sarah Mitchell, daughter of Rebecca Mitchell?" Sarah's heart skipped. No one had mentioned her mother in years. No one even knew her mother's name. "Who's asking?" The man produced a business card and held it out with the gravity of someone presenting a royal decree. "My name is David Thornton. I'm an attorney with Thornton and Associates in Memphis. I've been looking for you for quite some time, Miss Mitchell." Sarah didn't take the card. Her hands had started trembling, and she didn't want this stranger to see. "If this is about my mother's debts, I already told the collection agencies I can't pay. She died with nothing. I have nothing. You can't squeeze blood from a stone." "This isn't about debts, Miss Mitchell." David Thornton's voice softened slightly. "Quite the opposite. You've inherited something." The words didn't make sense. Sarah heard them, processed them, but they refused to connect to reality. "Inherited what? From whom my mother died broke. I don't have any family." "You had a grandmother, Dorothy Hayes. She passed away in 2019. Sarah felt the room tilt. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, and Maria was instantly at her side, one hand on her back. "I never knew my grandmother. My mother said they were estranged, some kind of falling out before I was born. I didn't even know she died." "Nevertheless," David continued, "she named your mother as her heir. When your mother passed, the inheritance transferred to you, and Dorothy made arrangements regarding a property that had been in her possession since 1977. Sarah's mouth went dry. "What kind of property?" David Thornton met her eyes, and for the first time, his professional mask slipped, revealing something like genuine surprise at what he was about to say. "An estate. 15 acres on the outskirts of Memphis, near Collierville. The property has been abandoned for nearly 50 years, but legally it now belongs to you." "An estate?" The word felt foreign on Sarah's tongue. "Like a house." "More than a house. It was the private retreat of Elvis Presley. Your grandmother was his personal nurse in the final years of his life. When Elvis died, certain properties fell into legal limbo. This was one of them. The estate disputes and tax complications took decades to resolve, but last year the final judgments cleared. The deed transferred to your grandmother's estate, and now it passes to you." Sarah stared at him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The washing machines hummed in their eternal cycle. Maria's hand tightened on her shoulder. "You're telling me," Sarah said slowly, each word careful and precise, "that I inherited Elvis Presley's house. One of them, yes, not Graceland, that's owned by his estate. This was a private property he purchased in 1973, a retreat where he could escape the pressures of fame. Very few people even knew it existed." Sarah's hand moved to her belly, cradling the baby as if for protection. "What's the catch?" David Thornton's expression grew serious. "The catch is that the property comes with significant back taxes, approximately $95,000. You have 1 year to pay them, or the state will seize the estate and auction it off." $95,000. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. She made $8.50 an hour. She couldn't afford to buy diapers for her baby. $95,000 might as well have been $95 million. "So basically," she said, her voice flat, "you're telling me I inherited a debt I can't pay and a house I can't afford." "The property could be sold," David said. "Even in its current condition, the land alone is worth something. You could potentially pay off the taxes and have money left over, but first you need to see it, sign the transfer documents, officially take possession." He held out a pen. Sarah stared at it for a long moment. Her whole life she had been told that good things didn't happen to people like her, that she was destined to struggle to scrape to survive but never thrive, that dreams were for other people. And now a stranger in an expensive suit was telling her she owned a piece of American history. It had to be a scam. It had to be a trap. Nothing this good came without strings attached. But what if it wasn't? What if this was real? What if for once in her miserable life the universe was throwing her a lifeline? She thought about her baby growing inside her, completely dependent on a mother who could barely keep herself alive. She thought about the hospital bills, she couldn't pay the rent, she couldn't make the future she couldn't see, and she thought about what her mother used to say before the cancer, and the debt and the despair wore her down to nothing. "When you've got nothing to lose, baby girl, you might as well roll the dice." Sarah took the pen. She signed. David Thornton handed her a thick folder containing the deed tax documents, survey maps, and a photograph that made her breath catch a faded image of a grand white mansion taken decades ago, beautiful and proud and completely unlike anything Sarah had ever owned. "The property is about 40 minutes outside Memphis," David said. "I'd recommend visiting soon. The structure has deteriorated significantly over the years. You'll want to assess what you're dealing with." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing, Miss Mitchell. If I were you, I'd be careful who I told about this inheritance. Elvis Presley's name still carries enormous weight. There are people who have been looking for this property for a very long time, people who would do anything to control what might be hidden there." "Hidden?" Sarah frowned. "What do you mean, hidden?" But David Thornton just smiled a thin, enigmatic expression and walked out the door. Sarah stood in the laundromat holding papers that said she owned a piece of Elvis Presley's legacy and tried to remember how to breathe. Maria broke the silence first. "Girl, what just happened?" "I don't know." Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "I think I just inherited Elvis Presley's house." "You think?" "I know. I mean, that's what he said, but it doesn't feel real. None of this feels real." Maria grabbed her arm. "We need to look this up. We need to find out if this is legitimate, because if it is, it doesn't matter. I can't pay $95,000 in taxes. I can't even pay my rent." "But he said you could sell it. He said the land alone is worth something." Sarah looked down at the deed in her hands. Her name was printed on the line marked Grantee, Sarah Ann Mitchell, legal owner of 15 acres and a mansion that had once belonged to the king of rock and roll. "I need to see it," she said suddenly. "I need to see it with my own eyes." "Duh? Now, Sarah, you're 7 months pregnant. You can't just drive to Memphis on a whim." "It's not a whim, it's—" Sarah struggled to find the words. "Maria, I've spent my whole life being careful, being responsible, playing by the rules, and where has it gotten me a trailer I can't afford and a baby I don't know how to provide for? This might be nothing. It might be a crumbling pile of bricks that I can't even sell for enough to cover the taxes, but what if it's not?" "What if it's not what?" Sarah met her friend's eyes. "What if it's the answer to everything?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "Take my car. It's not much, but it'll get you there and back." "Maria, I can't." "You can and you will." Maria pressed the keys into her hand. "But you call me every hour, understand? And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you get out of there immediately. You're not just responsible for yourself anymore." Sarah's hand moved to her belly where the baby was shifting restless. "I know," she said. "That's exactly why I have to do this." She left the laundromat at noon, telling Mr. Chen she had a family emergency. He wasn't happy he threatened to dock her pay to give her shifts to someone else, but Sarah barely heard him. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope, and she wasn't going to let it go. Maria's car was a 2008 Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on the odometer and a check engine light that had been on for 3 years. The heater worked intermittently. The radio only picked up one station. The passenger seat was held together with duct tape. But it ran, and that was all that mattered. Sarah plugged the address into her phone and started driving. The first 30 minutes were unremarkable. Highway driving strip malls and fast food restaurants giving way to suburbs and eventually to farmland. The sky was gray with the threat of rain, and the bare trees looked like skeletons against the winter landscape. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "Checking in, you okay?" She typed back with one hand. "Fine, about 20 minutes out." Another buzz almost immediately. "Be careful. Something about this feels too good to be true." Sarah didn't respond to that one. She was thinking the same thing. The GPS led her off the main highway and onto progressively smaller roads. Pavement gave way to gravel. The trees grew thicker, pressing in on both sides, blocking the pale winter light. And then her phone lost signal. Sarah pulled over and stared at the screen. No bars, no GPS, no connection to the outside world. She was alone. For a long moment, she sat in the car engine idling, heart pounding. Every horror movie she'd ever seen started exactly like this. Woman alone on a deserted road. No cell service. Strange destination ahead. But she hadn't come this far to turn back. She had a paper map in the folder David Thornton had given her. Old-fashioned, but functional. She studied it for a few minutes, traced the route with her finger, and started driving again. 10 minutes later, she saw the gate. Rusted iron hanging crooked on broken hinges. A faded sign barely readable, private property. No trespassing. And beyond it, a driveway disappearing into the trees. Sarah parked the car and got out. The air was different here, quieter, heavier, thick with the smell of pine and decay. No traffic sounds, no human voices, just the wind in the bare branches and the distant call of birds. She pushed the gate open, metal screeching in protest, and started walking. The driveway was long, at least a quarter mile, and the going was slow. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Fallen branches littered the path. The trees had grown wild, their branches forming a canopy that blocked what little light remained. The baby kicked hard, and Sarah stopped to catch her breath. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured. "This is crazy. Mama knows this is crazy." But she kept walking, and then she saw it. The mansion emerged from the trees like something from a dream or a nightmare. 3 stories of white stone, stained and weathered by decades of neglect. grand columns wrapped in ivy and strangled by vines, windows shattered or boarded over dark and empty like missing eyes, a roof that sagged dangerously in places, shutters hanging at broken angles, some missing entirely. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was hers. Sarah stood at the base of the front steps, her neck craned back, her mouth slightly open. She had never seen anything like this in her life. Even ruined, even forgotten, the mansion radiated a kind of faded grandeur that took her breath away. "Hello," she called out, though she didn't know why. "Is anyone here?" Her voice echoed off the stone and disappeared into the forest. She was completely alone. The front steps were cracked and uneven, and she climbed them carefully, testing each one before putting her full weight down. At the top, she found the massive double doors standing slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry and never bothered to close them properly. Sarah hesitated, her hand on the weathered wood. This was the moment, the point of no return. She pushed the door open. It groaned like something waking from a very long sleep, and the sound sent a shiver down her spine. Inside, darkness pressed against the pale light from the doorway, thick and almost solid. Sarah pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, illuminating a grand foyer that made her gasp. Even destroyed, even covered in decades of dust and decay, it was magnificent. A chandelier hung overhead, massive and ornate, most of its crystals still intact despite the years of neglect. A sweeping staircase curved upward, its marble steps, cracked but still graceful. The floor beneath her feet was marble too dirty and damaged but unmistakably expensive. This was real. This was actually impossibly real. She was standing in Elvis Presley's hidden mansion. Sarah moved deeper into the house, her flashlight beam sweeping back and forth. A living room with furniture covered in white sheets, now gray with dust. A grand piano in the corner, its keys yellowed and warped. A dining room with a table that could seat 20 chairs pushed back as if the guests had just gotten up and walked away. Every room told the same story, a life interrupted, frozen in time, abandoned without warning or farewell. She made her way up the grand staircase, moving slowly, one hand on her belly and one on the banister. The second floor held bedrooms, each one a time capsule of 1970s elegance, canopy beds and ornate mirrors, and wallpaper peeling in long strips. But it was the third bedroom at the end of a long hallway that stopped her in her tracks. This room was different. Smaller, more personal, less formal, and leaning against the far wall was a guitar case. Sarah's heart stuttered in her chest. She crossed the room and knelt beside the case, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. The clasps were tarnished, but still functional. She opened them with trembling fingers. Inside was a guitar. Not just any guitar, a Gibson, its sunburst finish faded, but its craftsmanship still evident. This was an instrument made to be played, loved, and cherished. And taped to the inside of the case was a photograph. Sarah lifted it carefully, her hands shaking. Elvis. Young, maybe mid-20s, sitting on a porch somewhere, this exact guitar in his hands. He was laughing at whoever was taking the picture, his face relaxed and happy in a way she had never seen in any public photograph. On the back, in faded blue ink, someone had written Hideaway 73, finally free. Sarah sat back on her heels, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just a house. This had been a sanctuary, a hiding place. The only spot in the world where the most famous man on earth could be nobody at all. And now it belonged to her. The baby kicked gentle this time, and Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know, sweetheart," she whispered. "I can hardly believe it either." She was about to stand about to continue exploring when she noticed something strange about the floor. The rug beneath her knees was bunched up in one corner, exposing the hardwood underneath. But the hardwood wasn't right. There was a seam there, too straight, too deliberate to be natural. A seam that looked almost like a cut, like someone had sawed through the floorboards and then put them back. Sarah's pulse quickened. She pushed the rug aside completely and examined the floor. Yes, there was definitely a rectangular section that had been cut and replaced. The wood grain didn't quite match. The nails were slightly different. A hidden panel. Sarah worked her fingers into the seam and pulled. The panel lifted easily as if it had been designed to be opened, and beneath it, nestled in a hollowed-out space between the floor joists, was a metal box. Sarah stared at it for a long moment, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Then she reached down and lifted it out. The box was heavy, heavier than she expected, and locked with an old combination padlock. But the metal was rusted, weakened by decades of neglect. She needed to open it. She needed to know what was inside. But not here. Not in this dark, decaying house alone and hours from help. Sarah tucked the box under her arm and made her way back downstairs, moving faster now. The house felt different somehow, more oppressive, more watching. As if the walls themselves knew she had found something she wasn't supposed to find. She burst out the front door and gulped fresh air, her lungs burning. The sun was lower now. The afternoon fading toward evening. She had been inside for hours without realizing it. The walk back to the car felt longer than the walk in. Every sound made her jump, a branch cracking, a bird taking flight, the wind rustling dead leaves. By the time she reached Maria's Civic, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fit the key in the ignition. She sat in the driver's seat, the metal box on her lap, and tried to calm her racing heart. "Okay," she said out loud, as if hearing her own voice would make things feel more normal. "Okay, let's see what we've got." She found a screwdriver in the glove compartment and worked it into the rusted padlock. The metal resisted, then groaned, then gave way with a snap. Sarah lifted the lid. Inside were papers, letters, documents, photographs, all yellowed with age but still readable. And underneath the papers, wrapped in a protective cloth, was a small leather journal. Sarah lifted the journal out first. The leather was soft, worn smooth by handling. Someone had touched this book many times, had held it and written in it, and trusted it with their thoughts. She opened to the first page. The handwriting was cramped and uneven, as if written in haste or distress. But the words were clear. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And maybe it's finally time for the truth." Sarah's breath caught. She turned the page. The entries were dated spanning from 1974 to 1977. Short notes, fragments of thought, the scattered reflections of a man under unbearable pressure. "They think they own me, every piece of me, my voice, my face, my name, but they don't own this. They don't even know it exists." Sarah kept reading, her hands trembling. "Moved another $500,000 into the vault today. The colonel would have a heart attack if he knew." Good. Let him wonder where the money goes. Let them all wonder. The vault. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. There was a vault. Somewhere on this property, Elvis Presley had built a vault, and he had been filling it with money that no one knew about, money that had been hidden for nearly 50 years. She flipped frantically through the journal, searching for more details, more information, anything that would tell her where the vault was and what it contained. And then she found the final entry. August 15th, 1977, the day before Elvis died. "It's all here. Everything I saved. Everything I couldn't give away while I was alive because they'd ask too many questions. The money, the art, the pieces of me I managed to keep for myself. It's all down below in the tunnel behind the door they'll never find. Let them think I'm broke. Let them think I'm desperate. Let them call me a fool who couldn't hold on to a dollar. The truth is buried where no one will think to look, and someday when the time is right, someone will find it. Someone who needs it more than I ever did. I hope you're reading this, whoever you are. I hope you found your way here, and I hope you understand why I did what I did. I wasn't saving this money for myself. I was saving it for you, for whoever had the courage to look where no one else would. Trust your heart. It brought you this far. Let it take you the rest of the way. EAP?" Sarah read the entry 3 times. Then she read it again. Then she put the journal down and stared out the windshield at the darkening trees, her mind reeling. Elvis Presley had hidden a fortune beneath this estate. A fortune in cash and art and treasures he had kept secret from everyone around him. He had known he was going to die, or at least suspected it, and he had left this journal as a map for whoever came after. For whoever needed it most. For her. Sarah's hands moved to her belly, cradling the baby who would be born in 2 months. The baby who deserved better than a trailer with broken heating and a mother who couldn't afford diapers. "I'm going to find it," she whispered. "I'm going to find it for you." She started the car and began the drive back to Nashville, the journal and the box on the seat beside her, her mind already planning her return. She didn't notice the black sedan that had been parked down the road from the estate's gate. She didn't see it pull onto the road behind her and follow at a careful distance. She didn't know that Richard Hayes' surveillance team had been watching her the entire time, and she had no idea that a phone call was already being made to Memphis. "Sir, she found something. She came out carrying a box, and the way she was moving fast, scared, excited, she definitely knows something she didn't know before." Richard Hayes' voice crackled through the phone speaker, cold and controlled. "Follow her, find out where she lives, and get me everything you can about what's in that box. And then we have a conversation with Miss Sarah Mitchell about the consequences of taking things that don't belong to her." The sedan kept its distance, its headlights invisible in the gathering darkness. Sarah drove on, unaware that the most dangerous part of her journey hadn't even begun. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the trailer, the journal open on the blanket beside her, and read Elvis's words over and over until she had them memorized. Down below, in the tunnel. Behind the door they'll never find. There was a tunnel under the estate. A secret tunnel leading to a hidden vault. And in that vault was what? How much money? How much art? How much of Elvis Presley's carefully hoarded treasures? Enough to change her life, enough to save her baby's future. The questions circled in her mind like sharks, relentless and hungry. She finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, and she dreamed of underground passages stretching into darkness of doors that opened onto rooms filled with gold, of a voice she didn't recognize saying, "Trust your heart." She woke before dawn, her decision made. She was going back. She was finding that tunnel, and she was going to discover what Elvis Presley had been hiding for nearly 50 years. She called Maria before the sun came up. "I need to borrow your car again." "Sarah, it's 5 in the morning. What's going on?" Sarah hesitated. She had promised herself she wouldn't tell anyone what she had found, not yet, not until she knew more. But Maria was her best friend, her only friend, and she deserved at least part of the truth. "I found something at the estate yesterday, something that might be important. I need to go back and investigate." "What kind of something?" "I can't explain over the phone. But Maria, if this is real, if what I think is down there is actually down there, it could change everything. For me and for Lily." "Lily." Sarah smiled, despite her exhaustion. She hadn't meant to say the name out loud, hadn't even told anyone she had chosen a name for the baby. "That's what I'm going to call her, if she's a girl, which the doctor says she is, Lily." Maria was quiet for a moment, then she sighed. "You're going to go whether I loan you the car or not, aren't you?" "Probably." "Then at least let me come with you." "Maria, you have work?" "I'll call in sick. God knows I've got enough sick days saved up." Maria's voice softened. "You're 7 months pregnant, and you're talking about exploring some abandoned mansion by yourself. I'm not letting you do that alone." Sarah's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's what friends are for. Now tell me what I need to bring." 2 hours later, they were on the road, Maria driving, Sarah navigating from the paper map because her phone still didn't have signal out here. Maria had packed supplies, flashlights, water, energy bars, a first aid kit, blankets. It's even a crowbar she kept in her trunk for emergencies. "You never know when you're going to need to break into something," she said when Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That's disturbingly specific." "I grew up in a rough neighborhood. Don't judge." They reached the estate just after 9 in the morning. The sky was clear today, pale winter blue, and the mansion looked slightly less menacing in the daylight, though no less decayed. Maria stood at the gate, staring up the driveway, and let out a low whistle. "Girl, when you said mansion, I thought you were exaggerating." "I don't exaggerate. Clearly." Maria shook her head. "So what exactly are we looking for?" Sarah pulled out the journal and showed her the final entry. Elvis wrote about a tunnel, underground somewhere beneath the house. He hid money down there, a lot of money and other things, art maybe, things he managed to keep secret from everyone around him. Maria read the entry, her expression shifting from skepticism to disbelief to something like awe. "And you think the tunnel is still there after 50 years? Only one way to find out." They walked up the driveway together, Sarah moving more slowly now, with Maria to keep her steady on the uneven ground. The mansion loomed ahead, grand and ruined and waiting. Inside the house felt different with a second person, less oppressive, less watching. Maria gasped at the chandelier and the staircase and the faded evidence of wealth beyond anything either of them had ever known. "This place must have been incredible," she said softly. "It still is, in a way, just differently." They searched the ground floor first, looking for any sign of a passage or hidden door. They found nothing, just dust and decay and the sad remains of furniture that had once been beautiful. The second floor was the same. Bedrooms and bathrooms and sitting rooms all frozen in time, all empty of secrets. "Maybe the tunnel entrance is in the basement," Sarah said. Maria looked uneasy. "You want to go into the basement of an abandoned house. That's literally how people die in horror movies." "I know, but the journal said down below. That has to mean underground." The basement door was behind the kitchen, swollen with moisture, and stuck in its frame. It took both of them pushing together to get it open, and when it finally gave way, the smell hit them like a wall mold, stagnant water, decay. "Oh, that's awful," Maria said, covering her nose. Sarah aimed her flashlight down the stairs. The beam revealed standing water at the bottom, black and still. "The basement's flooded." "How are we supposed to search a flooded basement?" Sarah didn't have an answer. She stared at the dark water, trying to think, trying to find a solution. And then she heard it. A voice outside the house. Male? Unfamiliar. "Hello, is someone in there?" Sarah and Maria exchanged glances. Sarah pressed a finger to her lips. They crept toward the front of the house, staying low, staying quiet. Through one of the broken windows, Sarah could see the driveway. An old man stood at the base of the front steps, thin and weathered, wearing overalls and a faded cap. He was looking up at the house with an expression she couldn't read. "I saw your car at the gate, huh?" he called out. "I know you're in there, and I'm guessing you found something you weren't expecting." Sarah's heart pounded. She looked at Maria, who shook her head. "Don't answer, don't reveal yourself." But something about the old man's voice made her pause. There was no threat in it, no malice. Just a tired kind of knowing, like he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "I'm not here to cause trouble," the man continued. "My name is Earl Watson. I live about a mile down the road. I helped build this house back in '74, and I know what's underneath it." Sarah's breath caught. Before Maria could stop her, she was moving toward the door. "Sarah, wait." But Sarah was already outside, standing on the porch, staring down at the old man who claimed to know Elvis Presley's greatest secret. "You helped build the house," she said. Earl looked up at her, his eyes taking in her pregnant belly, her young face, her mixture of fear and hope. "I did. And I helped build what's underneath it, too." He paused. "You found the journal, didn't you? The one he left in the guitar room. How do you know about that?" "Because I'm the one who suggested he leave it. I told him someone would come someday. Someone who needed help the way he needed help when he was young and broke and desperate. I told him to leave a trail for that person to follow." Sarah's legs felt weak. She sat down on the top step, her hand on her belly. "Why should I believe you?" Earl smiled sadly. "You don't have any reason to. I'm just an old man you've never met telling you a story that sounds impossible. But I'll tell you this much, the basement is flooded because the drainage system failed about 20 years ago. The tunnel entrance is behind the wine cellar, sealed behind a false wall, and the combination to the vault door is the birthday of the only person Elvis ever truly loved." "His mother," Sarah whispered. "Gladys, April 25th, 1912. Earl's eyes widened slightly. "You read more of the journal than I thought." "I read all of it. He mentions her over and over, how much he missed her, how nothing was ever right after she died." "Nothing ever was." Earl was quiet for a moment, lost in memory. "I met him in '73 at a gas station in Memphis. His car had broken down, and his entourage hadn't arrived yet. I helped him fix it. I used to work as a mechanic, and we got to talking. He seemed so lonely even then, so tired of being what everyone expected." Maria had appeared in the doorway behind Sarah, listening silently. "He hired me to help with this place," Earl continued. "Paid me in cash, told me to keep my mouth shut. I did the construction work, the tunnel, the vault. Me and 3 other guys, all from out of state. When it was done, he gave us each $100,000 and made us swear never to tell anyone." "But you're telling me now." "Because you're the one he was waiting for." Earl met her eyes. "I don't know how you ended up with this property, miss, but I've been watching this place for 47 years, keeping an eye out for whoever fate sent this way. And now, here you are, pregnant, struggling, desperate, exactly the kind of person Elvis wanted to help." Sarah felt tears threatening, but she forced them back. "The basement is flooded. I can't get to the tunnel." "I've got a pump in my truck. It'll take a few hours, but we can drain it enough to get through." "Why would you help me?" "You don't know me," Earl smiled. "Because I made a promise to a dying man, and I intend to keep it. Now do you want to see what's at the end of that tunnel or not?" Sarah looked at Maria, who shrugged helplessly. At this point, Maria said, "I'm too invested not to find out." Earl drove his truck up to the house and set up the pump. It was old but powerful, and within 2 hours the water in the basement had dropped to ankle level, low enough to wade through with rubber boots Earl produced from his truck bed. "I bought these years ago, he explained. Always figured I might need them someday." Sarah couldn't fit into the boots, her feet were too swollen from pregnancy, but Maria's sneakers were waterproof enough, and Earl said he would guide Sarah and carry her if necessary. "You sure about this?" Maria asked, looking at the dark basement entrance. "I'm sure I have to try." They descended into the darkness, 3 flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. The basement was a maze of rooms and corridors far larger than the house above. Suggested, Earl led them confidently, clearly familiar with the layout even after decades. "This way, chum," he said, turning down a corridor that ended in what appeared to be a solid stone wall. "The wine cellar is behind here. It looks like a dead end." "That's the idea." Earl ran his hand along the stones until he found what he was looking for, a slight depression in the mortar. He pressed it. Something clicked behind the wall. A seam appeared invisible before, and a section of stone swung inward to reveal a small room beyond. The wine cellar. It was empty now. Whatever bottles had once been stored here were long gone, but on the far wall, Sarah could see what Earl had described a rectangular section where the stones were slightly different, slightly newer. "Behind there," Earl said. "That's the tunnel entrance." Maria had already grabbed the crowbar. "Let's do this." It took nearly an hour to remove enough stones to expose the steel door beneath. Sarah watched her heart pounding her hand on her belly where Lily was kicking up a storm. "She knows something's happening," Sarah murmured. "Smart kid already," Maria said, wiping sweat from her forehead. When the last stone was cleared, they all stood back and stared at the door. It was exactly as Earl had described, modern industrial, completely out of place. A heavy combination lock was set into the steel. 4/25/12, Sarah said. April 25th, 1912. "You want to do the honors?" Earl asked. Sarah stepped forward. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely grip the dial. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and began to turn. 4, 5, 6. For a moment, nothing happened. Sarah's heart sank. Then there was a click, solid, definitive, and the door swung open with a hiss of stale air. Beyond was darkness, complete and absolute. Sarah aimed her flashlight into the passage. A tunnel stretched ahead, maybe 4 feet wide, its concrete walls smooth and undamaged despite the decades. The floor sloped gently downward, disappearing into shadows the flashlight couldn't reach. "How far does it go?" Sarah whispered. "About 200 yards, Earl said. "Straight line, gentle slope. At the end is the vault." Sarah looked at Maria, then at Earl, then back at the tunnel. "I have to see it." "I know," Earl said. "That's why we're here." They entered the tunnel, single file Earl first, then Sarah, then Maria bringing up the rear. The air was cool and dry, perfectly preserved by the sealed door. Their footsteps echoed in the confined space, the only sound in what felt like the belly of the earth. Sarah counted her steps. 50, 100, 150. The baby was quiet now, as if she too was holding her breath. 200. The tunnel opened into a larger space, and Sarah stopped so suddenly that Maria bumped into her from behind. "Oh my God," Maria breathed. Sarah couldn't speak at all. The vault was enormous, at least 40 feet long, 20 feet wide, with a ceiling that arched 15 feet overhead. Industrial shelving lined every wall, floor to ceiling, packed with cases and boxes and carefully wrapped packages. And in the center of the room, illuminated by their combined flashlight beams, was something that defied belief. Cases of cash. Bundled bills sealed in plastic stacked on shelf after shelf. Cases of art. She could see the edges of frames, the corners of canvases, the distinctive shape of sculptures wrapped in protective cloth. Cases of memorabilia. Costumes and instruments and gold records and photographs. Elvis Presley had not died broke. Elvis Presley had been hiding a fortune so vast that Sarah's mind couldn't even begin to calculate it, and all of it, every single piece, now belonged to her. Sarah's knees buckled. Maria caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to sit on the cold concrete floor. Earl stood silent, his weathered face unreadable in the flashlight's glow. "It's real," Sarah whispered. "It's actually real." "It's always been real," Earl said softly. "It's just been waiting for the right person to find it." Sarah sat on the floor of the vault, surrounded by more wealth than she had ever imagined, and cried. She cried for the baby growing inside her, who would never know hunger or fear or the crushing weight of poverty. She cried for her mother, who had died, believing that the world had nothing left to offer. She cried for Elvis Presley, who had spent his final years hiding this treasure, hoping that someday it would help someone the way he wished someone had helped him. And she cried for herself, for Sarah Mitchell, who had walked into an abandoned mansion looking for answers and found instead a miracle. When the tears finally stopped, she looked up at Earl. "What do I do now?" The old man smiled gently. "Now you figure out how to honor what you've been given. Elvis didn't hide this fortune for himself. He hid it because he wanted to help people who were struggling, people who needed a second chance. Whatever you do with this money, make sure it means something." Sarah nodded slowly. "I will. I promise." She struggled to her feet with Maria's help and began to walk through the vault, her flashlight beam moving from shelf to shelf, trying to comprehend the scale of what she had found. On a desk at the far end of the room, she found more documents, inventory lists, appraisals, everything meticulously cataloged in Elvis's own handwriting. And beneath the documents in a sealed envelope was a letter. "To whoever finds this," the envelope read. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've done what I always hoped someone would do. You followed your heart into the darkness and found the light waiting at the end. I don't know who you are. I don't know when you'll come. But I know that you needed to find this place, or you wouldn't have looked. Everything in this vault, I saved it for a purpose. I wanted to create something good, a foundation, a way to help people who were struggling the way my mama struggled before I could take care of her. But I ran out of time. The pressure got too heavy. The people around me wanted everything I had, but they didn't understand that some things aren't for sale. I trust that you understand. I trust that you'll finish what I started. And I trust that you'll remember this isn't just money. This is hope. This is second chances. This is proof that even at the end, when everything seems darkest, the light can still break through. Take care of yourself. Take care of whoever you love. And take care of this legacy. It's yours now. E8. Sarah read the letter twice, 3 times, until the words blurred through fresh tears. Thank you, she whispered to the empty vault, to the ghost of Elvis Presley, to whatever force had guided her to this moment. I won't let you down. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket next to her heart. Then she turned to face Maria and Earl. We need to document everything, photograph it, create an inventory. Before we tell anyone else about this, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. That's smart, Earl said. And you're going to need help, legal help. This kind of discovery, it's going to attract attention, not all of it good. What do you mean? Earl's expression darkened. Elvis's estate is still controlled by powerful people. When they find out about this vault, they're going to claim it belongs to them. They're going to say these assets should have been part of the original estate settlement, and they're going to fight you with everything they have. Sarah's hand moved to her belly. Then I'll fight back. You sure about that? These people have lawyers and money and decades of experience protecting their interests. You're a pregnant woman who works at a laundromat. Sarah met his eyes. I'm also the woman Elvis chose to find this vault. He could have left clues for anyone, for treasure hunters or historians or professional investigators, but instead he left them where only someone like me would look. Someone desperate. Someone with nothing to lose. She looked around the vault at the shelves of cash and art and memories. He believed in people like me. The least I can do is believe in myself. Earl studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled a real smile, warm and approving. You know what, I think he chose right. They spent the next 3 hours documenting everything. Sarah used her phone to photograph each shelf, each case, each item she could reach. Maria took notes in a spiral notebook she had brought, listing everything they could identify: cash, artwork, costumes, instruments, records, photographs, jewelry. When they finally emerged from the tunnel, exhausted and overwhelmed, the sun was setting over the Tennessee hills. Sarah stood on the front porch of the mansion, looking out at the forest that had hidden this secret for nearly 50 years. What happens now? Maria asked. Now I find a lawyer, a good one, someone who can help me protect this and figure out how to honor Elvis's wishes. And the taxes, the $95,000, Sarah almost laughed. I don't think that's going to be a problem anymore. They drove back to Nashville in the gathering darkness, Maria at the wheel, Sarah in the passenger seat with her hand on her belly. Neither of them spoke much. There was too much to process, too much to absorb. But as they crossed the city limits, Sarah's phone finally picked up a signal, and it immediately started buzzing with notifications. Texts from numbers she didn't recognize, voicemails from unknown callers, and one email sent just 2 hours ago from an address that made her blood run cold: rhays@presleystate.com, subject regarding your recent discovery. Miss Mitchell. The email read, It has come to our attention that you have accessed property and assets that rightfully belong to the Elvis Presley estate. We strongly advise you to refrain from removing, selling, or otherwise disposing of any items. You may have found as doing so would constitute theft and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. A representative from our office will be in contact shortly to discuss the terms of your cooperation. We trust you will make the right decision. Richard Hayes, Senior Counsel, Elvis Presley Estate. Sarah stared at the email, her heart pounding. They already knew. Someone had been watching her. Someone had reported back. And now, Richard Hayes, whoever he was coming for her. She looked up at Maria, who had seen her expression and was now watching her with concern. What is it? What's wrong? Sarah showed her the email. Maria read it twice, her face going pale. How did they find out so fast? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. They can threaten me all they want. That vault belongs to me. Elvis left it for me, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away. Sarah, these people are dangerous. You saw what he wrote, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. They're going to bury you in lawyers. Then I'll find lawyers of my own. With what money? Sarah looked at her friend. At this woman who had stood by her through everything, who had driven her to an abandoned mansion and helped her uncover a fortune, who had believed in her when she had given up on believing in herself. "I just found $200 million, Sarah said quietly. "I think I can afford a lawyer." Maria stared at her for a moment. Then she started to laugh, big, loud, disbelieving laughter that filled the car and echoed into the night. "Girl," she said when she could finally speak, "you are absolutely insane." "Probably," Sarah admitted, "and I am absolutely here for it." They drove the rest of the way home with the radio playing and the heater blasting and the weight of the impossible settling onto Sarah's shoulders like a crown. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know how she was going to fight the powerful forces aligned against her. But she knew one thing, with absolute certainty, she was not going to lose. Not now, not ever, not after everything she had survived to get here. That night, as she lay in her trailer with her hand on her belly, feeling Lily kick and shift and dream whatever baby's dream, Sarah Mitchell made a promise. To herself, to her daughter, to the ghost of a man who had believed in second chances. "I'm going to finish what you started," she whispered into the darkness, "and I'm going to make it mean something." Somewhere in Memphis, Richard Hayes was assembling his team, preparing his weapons, planning his attack. But Sarah Mitchell was ready. The fight had just begun. The next morning came too fast. Sarah woke at 5 a.m. to the sound of someone pounding on her trailer door. She sat up so quickly that her head spun, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sarah Mitchell, open up. We need to talk." The voice was male, authoritative, cold. Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed Maria with trembling fingers. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" Maria's voice was groggy with sleep. "Someone's at my door," Sarah whispered. "I don't know who they are." "Don't open it. I'm calling the police." "Miss Mitchell." The pounding intensified. "We know you're in there. This can be easy or it can be difficult. The choice is yours." Sarah pressed herself against the wall as far from the door as she could get in the tiny trailer. Her hand moved to her belly where Lily was stirring, disturbed by her mother's racing heartbeat. "It's going to be okay," she whispered to her baby. "Mama's going to figure this out." The pounding stopped. For a long, terrible moment, there was only silence. Then she heard footsteps moving around the outside of the trailer. Someone was circling, looking for another way in. She heard them pause at each window, testing, checking. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "Police on the way. Stay hidden. Don't make a sound." The footsteps stopped at the back of the trailer right outside her bedroom window. "We're not going away, Miss Mitchell." The voice was different now, closer, more intimate. "Richard Hayes sends his regards. He wants you to know that he's a reasonable man. He's willing to make you an offer, a generous offer. All you have to do is cooperate." Sarah didn't respond. She barely breathed. $2 million, the voice continued. "Cash, untraceable. In exchange for the location of the vault and a signed statement relinquishing all claims to its contents. You could disappear, start over somewhere new, give that baby of yours a good life. $2 million. A week ago, that amount would have seemed like all the money in the world. A week ago, she would have sold her soul for a fraction of that sum, but that was before she had seen what was in the vault, before she had read Elvis's letter, before she had understood what she had been trusted to protect. "Think about it," the voice said. "We'll be in touch." She heard footsteps retreating, a car door opening and closing, an engine starting. Then silence. Sarah stayed pressed against the wall for another 10 minutes, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. When the police finally arrived, she was still there, clutching her phone like a lifeline, her hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. The officers took her statement, but she could see in their eyes that they didn't believe her. A pregnant woman in a trailer park claiming that mysterious men had threatened her over a hidden fortune. It sounded like a story she had made up for attention. "We'll file a report," one of them said, his voice professionally neutral. "But without any witnesses or evidence of forced entry, there's not much we can do. You might want to consider staying with a friend for a few days." After they left, Sarah sat on her bed and tried to think. Richard Hayes knew where she lived. He knew about the vault. He had people willing to show up at her door in the middle of the night and make threats. She wasn't safe here anymore. Maria arrived 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas, her face tight with worry. "Pack a bag," she said before Sarah could speak. "You're staying with me until we figure this out." "Maria, I can't put you in danger." "You're not putting me anywhere. I'm choosing to help my friend." Maria grabbed Sarah's arm. "Now pack. We don't have time to argue." Sarah packed what little she had clothes, toiletries, the folder of documents from the estate, and most importantly, Elvis's journal. Everything fit into one duffel bag. The sum total of her life small enough to carry with one hand. As they drove away from the trailer park, Sarah looked back one last time at the place that had been her home. She had a feeling she would never see it again. Maria's apartment was small, but clean, a one-bedroom unit in a building that had seen better days but was safe enough. Maria insisted that Sarah take the bedroom while she slept on the couch. "You're 7 months pregnant," she said when Sarah tried to argue. "You need a real bed. End of discussion." That afternoon, they sat at Maria's kitchen table and tried to make a plan. "You need a lawyer," Maria said. "A real one. Someone who specializes in this kind of thing." "What kind of thing? Secret fortunes hidden by dead rock stars? Estate law, inheritance disputes, whatever this is." Maria pulled out her phone. "I'm going to search for the best probate attorney in Tennessee." "I can't afford the best anything." "Didn't you have $200 million in a vault? I think you can figure out the payment later." The search led them to a name, Rachel Kim. According to her website, Rachel Kim was a partner at one of Nashville's most prestigious law firms, specializing in complex estate litigation. She had won cases against major corporations, government agencies, and some of the wealthiest families in the South. "She looks expensive," Sarah said, staring at the professional headshot on the screen. "She looks like exactly what you need." Sarah called the number on the website. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "Kim & Associates, how may I help you?" "I need to speak with Rachel Kim. It's urgent." "Ms. Kim is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" Sarah hesitated. "How did you explain something like this to a stranger? Tell her it's about the Elvis Presley estate. Tell her I found something that's been hidden for almost 50 years. And tell her that people are already threatening me to give it up." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Please hold." Sarah waited, her heart pounding. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Then a new voice came on the line, sharp, professional, and intensely focused. "This is Rachel Kim. Who am I speaking with?" "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I inherited a property outside Memphis that used to belong to Elvis Presley. There's a vault underneath it, a secret vault. I found it 3 days ago." "What's in the vault?" "Everything. Cash art memorabilia documents. I don't know exactly how much it's worth, but it's a lot. And now the Presley estate's lawyers are threatening me. They showed up at my home this morning." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Where are you now?" "I'm at a friend's apartment in Nashville. I was afraid to stay at my place." "You were right to be afraid. Listen to me carefully, Miss Mitchell. Do not go back to your home. Do not speak to anyone from the Presley estate or anyone claiming to represent them. Do not sign anything, agree to anything, or accept any offers. Can you come to my office today?" "Today? I thought you were in a meeting." "I was. This is more important." Rachel's voice softened slightly. "Miss Mitchell, if what you're telling me is true, you're sitting on one of the biggest discoveries in American music history, and you're going to need serious help to protect it. Can you be here by 3 o'clock? Sarah looked at Maria, who nodded. "I'll be there." Rachel Kim's office was on the 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Nashville. The receptionist led Sarah and Maria through a maze of hallways to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rachel herself was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and an intensity that filled the room. She stood as they entered and extended her hand. "Miss Mitchell, please sit down. Tell me everything." Sarah told her. The inheritance, the journal, the tunnel, the vault, the threats. She showed Rachel the documents, the photographs on her phone, Elvis's letter. When she finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Do you have any idea what you've found?" she finally asked. "I know it's valuable. I know it's worth a lot of money." "It's worth more than money." Rachel leaned forward. "You found proof that Elvis Presley was systematically hiding assets from his own estate for years before his death. You found evidence that the official narrative that he died, broke and desperate, was completely false. And you found his explicit instructions for what he wanted done with that fortune." "The foundation," Sarah said. "He wanted to create a foundation." "Exactly. And that letter you found, in legal terms, it's essentially a testamentary instrument. A document expressing the deceased's wishes for the disposition of their property." Rachel's eyes gleamed. "If we can prove that Elvis intended this collection to fund charitable work, we can argue for creating a foundation in his name with you as the trustee. Me, I'm nobody. I fold laundry for a living. You're the person Elvis chose. That's not nobody. That's everything." Sarah's head was spinning. "What about Richard Hayes?" "The threats." Rachel's expression hardened. "Richard Hayes is a shark. He's been protecting the Presley estate's interest for decades, and he's not used to losing. He's going to come at you with everything he has, legal pressure, financial intimidation, maybe worse." "Worse?" "The estate is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. People have done terrible things for much less." Rachel stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city. But here's the thing. Hayes is used to fighting people who can be bullied. People who don't have resources or support. You're different. How am I different? I have nothing. Rachel turned to face her. You have $200 million in that vault. You have Elvis Presley's own words saying he wanted you to find it. And now you have me. You're taking my case. I'm doing more than that. Rachel sat back down and met Sarah's eyes. I'm going to help you build a foundation that honors Elvis's wishes, protects his legacy, and ensures that his fortune goes exactly where he intended. And I'm going to make sure Richard Hayes doesn't destroy you in the process. Sarah felt tears threatening. Why, you don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're pregnant and alone. I know you're being threatened by powerful people. And I know that you found something extraordinary, and your first instinct was to honor a dead man's wishes instead of just taking the money and running. Rachel smiled slightly. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Rachel assembled a team of forensic accountants, art appraisers, security consultants. They needed to document everything in the vault, establish its value, and create an airtight legal framework to protect Sarah's claim. But before any of that could happen, they needed to secure the property. Hayes knows you found something, Rachel explained. He doesn't know exactly what or where, but he's going to send people to investigate. We need to get there first. They drove to the estate early the next morning. Sarah, Maria, Rachel, and a team of 4 security specialists that Rachel had hired. Earl was waiting at the gate. Figured you'd be back, he said as Sarah approached. Brought some friends this time. This is Rachel Kim, my lawyer. She's helping me figure out what to do. Earl studied Rachel for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. You're going to need someone smart in your corner. Mr. Watson, Rachel said, I understand you helped build the vault. Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement to that effect? Been waiting 47 years for someone to ask. They descended into the vault together, Sarah, Rachel, Earl, and 2 of the security specialists carrying professional cameras and equipment. The appraisers would come later, but for now they needed comprehensive documentation of everything. The vault was exactly as Sarah remembered, massive shelves of cash art memorabilia, all preserved in the cool, dry air. But this time she could look at it with clearer eyes, without the shock of discovery clouding her vision. My God, Rachel breathed as her flashlight swept across the space. This is... I know. No, you don't understand. Rachel walked to one of the shelves and examined a wrapped canvas. This is a Warhol, an original Warhol. And this... She moved to another shelf. These are first-pressing Sun Records releases. There are collectors who would kill for these. How much? Sarah asked. Total, I mean. What do you think it's all worth? Rachel was quiet for a moment, calculating. Based on a preliminary assessment, the cash alone is probably $30 million, give or take. The art, if those are all originals, could be another $150 million. The memorabilia, the instruments, the costumes, conservatively, another $20 to $30 million. She turned to face Sarah. You're looking at approximately $200 million. Maybe more, depending on what the detailed appraisals reveal. Sarah's knees went weak. She had known the number, had heard it before, but hearing it confirmed by a professional made it suddenly terrifyingly real. And it's all mine. That's what we're going to prove. They spent 6 hours in the vault documenting every shelf, every case, every item they could reach. By the time they emerged, the sun was setting and Sarah was exhausted, her back aching, her feet swollen, her mind overwhelmed. But they weren't done yet. As they walked back to the cars, Rachel's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, and her expression went cold. When? Are you sure? Okay, we're on our way. She hung up and turned to Sarah. That was my office. Richard Hayes just filed an emergency injunction. He's trying to freeze all assets associated with the estate and have you removed from the property. Sarah's heart dropped. Can he do that? He can try. The hearing is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Tomorrow, that's not enough time to prepare. It's exactly enough time. Rachel's jaw was set. He's counting on you being scared and unprepared. He's counting on you folding under pressure. And if I don't, then we fight. The courthouse was packed. Word had somehow leaked. Sarah suspected Hayes had done it deliberately, and reporters crowded the hallway outside the courtroom shouting questions as she walked past with Rachel at her side. Miss Mitchell, is it true you found Elvis Presley's hidden fortune? How much is the collection worth? What are you going to do with the money? Rachel kept her moving forward, ignoring the chaos. Inside the courtroom, Richard Hayes was already seated at the opposing table with 3 other lawyers in matching expensive suits. He looked up as Sarah entered and their eyes met. He smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had already decided the outcome. Sarah sat down, her hands trembling, her heart racing. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her mother's distress. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, her hand on her belly. "We're going to be okay." Judge Helen Marcus entered and everyone rose. She was in her 60s with iron gray hair and a face that suggested she had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. "Be seated," she said. "Mr. Hayes, I understand you've filed an emergency motion. Proceed." Richard Hayes stood buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "Your Honor, my client, the Elvis Presley estate, has become aware of a serious threat to assets that rightfully belong to the estate. Miss Mitchell has unlawfully accessed and is now attempting to claim property that was never legally transferred out of Elvis Presley's possession. We are seeking an immediate injunction to prevent her from removing, selling, or otherwise disposing of these assets while the matter is resolved." Judge Marcus turned to Rachel. "Miss Kim," Rachel stood. "Your Honor, my client is the legal owner of the property in question. The deed was transferred to her through a legitimate inheritance. As for the assets found on that property, we have documentation in Elvis Presley's own handwriting establishing his clear intention that these items go to whoever discovered them." "That's absurd," Hayes interrupted. "You can't transfer property rights through a handwritten note. There's no legal precedent." "Actually, there is," Rachel cut in. "Tennessee recognizes holographic wills, handwritten documents expressing a testator's wishes. The letter Miss Mitchell found meets all the legal requirements. And more importantly, it clearly states that Elvis intended to create a charitable foundation with these assets." Judge Marcus held up her hand. "I'll hear arguments from both sides. But I want to make one thing clear. This is an emergency hearing, not a full trial. I'm not making any final determinations today. I'm simply deciding whether to grant the injunction." The next 2 hours were brutal. Hayes presented his case with cold precision, arguing that the assets had always belonged to the estate, that Sarah was essentially a trespasser, that allowing her to maintain control of the vault would result in irreparable harm to Elvis's legacy. Rachel countered every argument with evidence from the journal testimony from Earl Watson and the letter Elvis had left behind. She painted a picture of a man who had deliberately hidden assets from people he didn't trust, hoping that someday they would be discovered by someone worthy. "Elvis Presley was one of the most surveilled, controlled, and exploited artists in history," Rachel said. "Every dollar he earned was watched, tracked, and often taken by managers and handlers who viewed him as a commodity. This vault was his act of rebellion, his way of ensuring that something at least would go where he wanted it to go." Through it all, Sarah sat quietly, her hand on her belly, watching the battle unfold. And then Judge Marcus asked her to speak. "Miss Mitchell, I've heard a lot of legal arguments today, but I want to hear from you directly. Why do you believe you deserve to control these assets?" Sarah stood slowly, her legs unsteady. She had never spoken in a courtroom before. She had never spoken anywhere that mattered, but she thought about Lily growing inside her. She thought about her mother, who had died, believing the world had nothing left to offer. She thought about Elvis, who had hidden his treasures in the darkness and trusted fate to deliver them to the right hands. "I don't know if I deserve anything," she said quietly. "I'm a laundromat worker. I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm alone. A month ago, I couldn't even pay my rent." She looked at Richard Hayes. "But I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be treated like you don't matter, to feel like the whole world has given up on you." She turned back to the judge. "Elvis wrote that he was saving this fortune for someone who needed it more than he did. He could have left instructions for anyone, collectors, museums, his own family, but he didn't. He left it for whoever had the courage to look where no one else would." Her voice grew stronger. "I looked. I found it. And I intend to honor his wishes. Not because I want the money. I don't care about being rich. But because he trusted me. A man I never met who died before I was born somehow trusted that the right person would find his message in the darkness." She placed her hand on her belly. "I'm not going to let him down." The courtroom was silent. Judge Marcus studied Sarah for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. "I'm denying the emergency injunction." Hayes surged to his feet. "Your Honor." "Sit down, Mr. Hayes." The judge's voice was steel. "I've heard your arguments, and I'm not convinced that the estate has established a clear claim to these assets. The documentation provided by Miss Kim suggests that Elvis Presley had clear intentions for this property, and those intentions deserve further examination." She turned to Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, I'm not granting you full ownership today. That will require a proper trial, but I am granting you temporary custody of the assets pending further proceedings. I'm also ordering that the estate refrain from any contact with Miss Mitchell outside of official legal channels." She looked directly at Hayes. "Any harassment, intimidation, or attempts to coerce Miss Mitchell will be dealt with severely. Do I make myself clear?" Hayes's face was a mask of barely contained fury. "Crystal clear, Your Honor." Outside the courthouse, the reporters were waiting, but this time Sarah didn't run from their questions. "Miss Mitchell, what's your reaction to the judge's ruling?" She looked into the cameras, exhausted, but unbroken. "I'm grateful, and I'm going to do exactly what I promised, honor Elvis Presley's wishes, and use this fortune to help people who need it." "What about Richard Hayes, the estate's legal team?" Sarah glanced back at the courthouse doors where Hayes was emerging with his lawyers, his face dark with anger. "They can fight me all they want, but they're not going to win." That night, Sarah lay in Maria's spare bedroom, too tired to sleep, too wired to rest. She had won the first battle, but she knew the war was just beginning. Hayes wouldn't stop. Men like him never stopped. He would find other angles of attack, other ways to pressure her, other strategies to break her down. But she had something he didn't. She had a promise to keep. She had a daughter to protect. And she had the words of a dead king echoing across decades. "Trust your heart. It brought you this far. Let it take you the rest of the way." Sarah closed her eyes and placed her hand on her belly. "We're going to be okay, Lily," she whispered. "Mama's going to make sure of it." The baby kicked once, gently, and Sarah smiled. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new threats, new challenges she couldn't even imagine. But tonight she had won, and that was enough. 3 days after the hearing, Sarah's world exploded again. She was at Rachel's office reviewing documents with the legal team when Rachel's assistant burst through the door. "You need to see this, now." Rachel turned on the television in her office. Every channel was showing the same thing, aerial footage of the estate police cars, crowds of people gathered at the gates. And a headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen, "Break in at Elvis' secret estate vault reportedly accessed." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "No, no, no, no." Rachel was already on the phone barking orders. "Get me the Collierville police chief, now." Sarah stared at the screen, on it, watching strangers swarm over the property she had just begun to think of as hers. "How did they know where it was?" she whispered. Rachel looked at her grimly. Someone talked. Someone always talks. Sarah thought about the reporters outside the courthouse, the questions they had shouted, the cameras that had followed her every move, and she thought about Richard Hayes and his cold, predatory smile. "He did this, she said. "Hayes, he couldn't take it legally, so he leaked the location. He's hoping the publicity will force my hand. Or destroy the evidence before it can be properly documented." Sarah grabbed her bag. "We have to get there. We have to see what happened." "Sarah, you're 7 months pregnant. The place is probably chaos." "I don't care. That's my property, my responsibility." She met Rachel's eyes. "Elvis trusted me to protect his legacy. I'm not going to sit here and watch it be destroyed." The drive to the estate took 2 hours because of traffic, news vans, curious tourists, opportunists hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous vault. Police had set up a perimeter, but Rachel's credentials got them through. Earl was already there, standing near the mansion's entrance, his weathered face tight with anger. "They got in through a side window, he said as Sarah approached. "Broke the lock on the wine cellar door. By the time the motion sensors alerted the security company, they were already in the tunnel." "How much did they take?" Earl shook his head slowly. "That's the thing. They didn't take anything." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean? I mean everything's still there. The cash, the art, all of it. They just looked around, took pictures, then left." Rachel's expression darkened. "They weren't stealing. They were documenting." "Why would they pile evidence?" Rachel cut in. "Hayes is building a case. He wants to prove exactly what's in that vault so he can argue for a larger share if we go to trial. So he sent people to break into my property. He's too smart to do it himself, but I'd bet anything he knows exactly who did." Sarah walked toward the mansion, her steps heavy with exhaustion, and fury. Inside, the damage was minimal, a broken window, a forced door. But it felt like a violation nonetheless. She descended into the basement through the wine cellar, through the tunnel she had walked just days before. The vault was exactly as she had left it. Nothing moved. Nothing missing. But somehow that made it worse. They had been here. They had seen everything. And now they would use that knowledge against her. Sarah stood in the center of the vault, surrounded by Elvis's treasures, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. How was she supposed to protect all of this? How was she supposed to fight people with unlimited resources and no conscience? How was she supposed to do any of this alone? But she wasn't alone. Maria appeared at her side, having followed her down. Rachel stood in the tunnel entrance. Earl waited above, guarding the property like he had for decades. And inside her, Lily kicked a reminder that everything she did now, she did for someone else. "I'm not giving up," Sarah said quietly. Rachel nodded. "Good, because this is going to get worse before it gets better." "Then let it get worse." Sarah turned to face her lawyer, her friend, her tiny army of supporters. "I found this vault because I had nothing to lose. I walked into the darkness because I had nowhere else to go. They think they can scare me." She shook her head. "They have no idea what I've already survived." The next morning, Sarah called a press conference. Rachel advised against it. Maria begged her to reconsider. Even Earl, who had supported her through everything, warned her that going public would make her a target. But Sarah had made her decision. She stood on the steps of the courthouse cameras, flashing microphones thrust toward her face, and spoke directly to the world. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. 3 weeks ago, I inherited a property that once belonged to Elvis Presley. On that property, I discovered a vault containing approximately $200 million worth of assets that Elvis had hidden from everyone around him." The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled frantically. Elvis left a letter explaining why he hid these treasures. He wanted to create a foundation, a way to help struggling families, to support artists, to give back to people who had nothing. Her voice grew stronger. "That's exactly what I intend to do." "Miss Mitchell, what about the Presley estate's claims?" "They can make all the claims they want, but Elvis made his wishes clear. He didn't want this fortune going to lawyers and corporations. He wanted it to help real people." "Are you prepared for a legal battle?" Sarah thought about Richard Hayes, about his threats, about the break-in at her property. "I'm prepared for whatever comes, because this isn't about me anymore. It's about honoring a promise made by a man who never got the chance to keep it himself." She placed her hand on her belly. "And it's about building something better for the next generation." The press conference was broadcast nationwide. Within hours, Sarah Mitchell's name was known across the country, and in his Memphis office, Richard Hayes watched the coverage with cold, calculating eyes. "She wants a war," he said quietly. "Then we'll give her one." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's time for Phase 2. She was eating breakfast at Maria's apartment when her phone rang. The number was blocked. "Hello, how? Miss Mitchell, this is Detective Raymond Cooper with the Memphis Police Department. We need you to come in for questioning." Sarah's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "Questioning about what?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone. How soon can you be here?" "I don't understand. What is this about?" "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you contact your attorney and come to the station voluntarily. The alternative would be considerably less pleasant for everyone involved." The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, her breakfast forgotten, her heart hammering against her ribs. Maria appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Who was that?" "The police. They want to question me about something." "About what?" "They wouldn't say." Sarah called Rachel immediately. The attorney answered on the first ring, her voice already tense. "I was just about to call you. We have a problem." "I know. The police want to question me." "It's worse than that." "Shh." Rachel's voice dropped. "Hayes filed a criminal complaint this morning. He's accusing you of theft, trespassing, and destruction of property. He claims you broke into the vault and removed assets that belonged to the estate." Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the kitchen floor, her hand pressed against her belly. "That's insane. I didn't steal anything. I didn't destroy anything." "I know, but Hayes has photographs from the break-in 3 days ago. He's claiming those photos show damage that occurred before his people arrived. He's saying you ransacked the vault and hid evidence of what you took." "That's a lie. Everything is documented. We photographed every single item." "Which is exactly why this won't hold up in court. But that's not the point." Rachel's voice was grim. "He's not trying to win a criminal case. He's trying to destroy your credibility. If he can get you arrested, get your face on every news channel with the word theft attached to it, public opinion shifts. Suddenly, you're not the sympathetic pregnant woman fighting for a dead man's wishes. You're a criminal." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. "What do I do?" "You come to my office, we go to the police station together, and you don't say a single word without me present." The Memphis Police Department was a squat building that smelled like coffee and desperation. Sarah walked through the front doors with Rachel at her side, her chin up and her shoulders back, despite the terror churning in her stomach. Detective Cooper was waiting for them. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a face that had seen too much and cared too little. "Miss Mitchell, thank you for coming in voluntarily." "My client is happy to cooperate," Rachel said smoothly. But I want to make clear that she has done nothing wrong, and any attempt to charge her based on Richard Hayes' fabricated allegations will be met with immediate legal action. Cooper's expression didn't change. Why don't we step into the interview room and discuss the details? The interview room was small and cold. Sarah sat across from Cooper Rachel beside her, a recorder on the table between them. Miss Mitchell, can you describe for me exactly what happened when you first accessed the vault beneath the Presley estate? Sarah told him everything. The inheritance, the journal, the tunnel, the discovery. She described every item she had seen, every photograph she had taken, every precaution she had exercised. Cooper listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled out a folder and slid several photographs across the table. These images were taken by investigators hired by the Presley estate. They show what appears to be significant damage to several items in the vault: torn documents, broken frames, evidence of rough handling. Sarah stared at the photographs. They showed exactly what Cooper described: damaged items, scattered papers, chaos that had definitely not existed when she was there. This isn't what the vault looked like when I was there, she said firmly. Everything was pristine, perfectly preserved. You're saying these photographs are fake. I'm saying someone damaged those items after I left. Probably the same people who broke in 3 days ago. Cooper raised an eyebrow. The estate's investigators claim they found the vault in this condition. They're suggesting that you caused this damage during your unauthorized access. Unauthorized, Rachel cut in. My client owns the property. She has every right to access any part of it. The estate disputes her ownership. The estate can dispute whatever they want. The deed is in her name. The transfer was legal, and we have time-stamped photographs proving that every item in that vault was intact when Miss Mitchell was there. Rachel pulled out her own folder and spread photographs across the table, the documentation they had gathered during their inventory. These were taken 48 hours before the break-in. As you can see, Detective, every item is in perfect condition. Whatever damage exists now was caused by someone else, someone who wanted to frame my client. Cooper studied the photographs for a long moment. His expression was impossible to read. I'll need to verify the timestamps on these images. Of course, we'll provide full access to the original files and metadata. And I'll need to interview other witnesses. You mentioned a man named Earl Watson. He's prepared to give a statement. He'll confirm everything my client has said. Cooper was quiet for a moment. Then he closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Miss Mitchell? I'm going to be honest with you. Richard Hayes has a lot of influence in this city. He's been putting pressure on my department to pursue charges against you. Sarah's heart sank. But, Cooper continued, I've been a detective for 23 years. I know the difference between evidence and fabrication, and what Hayes is presenting doesn't add up. He stood. I'm not going to arrest you today, but I can't promise that someone above me won't overrule my judgment. My advice: document everything, trust no one, and watch your back. He opened the door. You're free to go. Outside the police station, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That was close, she said. Too close. Rachel's face was tight with concern. Hayes is escalating. The criminal complaint was just the beginning. What's next? I don't know, but we need to be ready for anything. The answer came 3 days later. Sarah was at Rachel's office when the news broke. Every television, every website, every social media platform suddenly exploded with the same story. Breaking news from Memphis. Documents have surfaced suggesting that Sarah Mitchell, the woman claiming ownership of Elvis Presley's hidden vault, may have forged the inheritance paperwork she used to claim the property. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. What? That's impossible. Rachel was already on her phone barking orders to her team. Get me those documents. I want to know where they came from and who leaked them. The forged documents appeared everywhere within hours. Side-by-side comparisons of Sarah's deed with what experts claimed was the original. Analysis suggesting her signature had been altered. Quotes from unnamed sources questioning the legitimacy of her claim. This is Hayes, Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. He manufactured this. Of course he did, but proving it is another matter. Maria arrived at the office, her face pale with worry. Sarah, have you seen what they're saying online? People are calling you a fraud, a con artist. They're saying you made up the whole story. Sarah stared at the television on watching her name being dragged through the mud by people who had never met her, who knew nothing about her life or her struggles or her truth. 48 hours ago, she had been a hero, the underdog who had discovered a hidden fortune and pledged to use it for good. Now she was a villain. We have to fight back, she said. How, Tsuk? Maria asked. "They control the narrative. They have unlimited resources. We can't compete with that." "We can if we tell the truth." Sarah turned to Rachel. "The original documents, the deed, the inheritance paperwork, everything David Thornton gave me. Where are they? In my safe. Why? Because we're going to have them verified by independent experts, by forensic analysts who have no connection to either side. And then we're going to hold a press conference and show the world that Richard Hayes is a liar." Rachel considered this for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "It's risky. If the verification doesn't go our way, it will, because I'm telling the truth." Sarah's voice was steel. "I didn't forge anything. I didn't steal anything. I found exactly what Elvis left for me to find, and I intend to honor his wishes." She placed her hand on her belly, where Lily was kicking furiously. "My daughter is going to grow up knowing that her mother didn't back down, that she fought for what was right even when the whole world was against her." Rachel picked up her phone. "I know a forensic document examiner, one of the best in the country. If your documents are legitimate, he'll prove it. Make the call." The examination took 4 days. 4 days of waiting, of dodging reporters, of watching her reputation be systematically destroyed by media outlets that had already decided she was guilty. 4 days of sleepless nights and anxious mornings, and a growing fear that maybe somehow Hayes had found a way to tamper with her documents. But on the 5th day, Rachel called with the results. "They're authentic. Every single document is genuine. The signatures match, the paper is period appropriate, the chain of custody is unbroken. There's no evidence of forgery or tampering." Sarah collapsed onto Maria's couch, tears streaming down her face. "We got him?" "Not yet, but we're about to." The press conference was held on the steps of the Memphis courthouse. Every major news outlet was present. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Sarah stood at the podium, Rachel beside her, and waited for silence. 5 days ago, documents were leaked suggesting that I had forged my inheritance paperwork. Those documents were fabrications created by someone who wanted to destroy my credibility and steal what Elvis Presley left behind. She held up a thick folder. In my hand, I have the results of an independent forensic examination conducted by Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the leading document analysts in the United States. Dr. Webb has examined every piece of paperwork related to my inheritance, and his conclusion is unambiguous. She looked directly into the cameras. Every document is authentic. Every signature is genuine. There is no evidence of forgery, tampering, or fraud of any kind. The crowd erupted with questions, but Sarah held up her hand. "I know who leaked those false documents. I know who has been trying to destroy me from the moment I discovered that vault. And I have a message for him." She paused, her eyes finding a camera and holding it. "Richard Hayes, you've threatened me. You've had people break into my property. You've tried to have me arrested. You've attacked my reputation with lies and fabricated evidence. And through all of it, I've refused to give up." Her voice grew stronger. "I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to surrender. And I'm not going to let you steal Elvis Presley's legacy because you think you're entitled to it." She placed her hand on her belly. "This isn't just about money. It's about honoring a man's final wishes. It's about building something good from something that was hidden in darkness for almost 50 years. And it's about showing my daughter that you don't give up just because the fight is hard." She stepped back from the podium. "I'll see you in court." The tide began to turn. Public opinion, which had shifted against Sarah after the forged documents were leaked, started shifting back. People admired her courage, her refusal to back down, her willingness to fight against overwhelming odds. Support poured in from unexpected places. Elvis fans organized rallies in her defense. Civil rights groups condemned Hayes' tactics. Even some celebrities spoke out, calling for the estate to honor Elvis's wishes. But Sarah knew the fight was far from over. 2 weeks after the press conference, she received a phone call that changed everything. "Miss Mitchell, this is Thomas Garrett. I'm a historian and author. I've spent 40 years studying Elvis Presley's life." Sarah sat up straighter. She had heard of Thomas Garrett. He had written several books about Elvis and was considered one of the foremost authorities on the King's life and legacy. "What can I do for you, Mr. Garrett?" "It's what I can do for you. I have documentation that might help your case. Letters, interviews, evidence that Elvis was planning to create a charitable foundation for years before his death." Sarah's heart raced. What kind of evidence? In 1976, Elvis had a conversation with a nurse at Baptist Memorial Hospital. She documented it in her personal journal. He talked about feeling trapped, about wanting to help people who were struggling, about creating something meaningful with his wealth. "Do you have that journal?" "I have copies. The original nurse died in 2003, but she gave me permission to use her documentation before she passed." Thomas paused. There's more? I have a letter Elvis wrote to a friend 3 months before he died. He explicitly mentions setting something aside for when he was free. The vault, Sarah breathed. That's my interpretation as well, Miss Mitchell. I've been waiting a long time for this moment. I always believed Elvis had hidden something, that the official story of his financial ruin was a lie. Now you've proven it. Will you testify if this goes to trial? I'll do more than testify. I'll dedicate whatever time I have left to making sure Elvis's true wishes are honored. The call ended, and Sarah sat in silence, processing what she had just learned. She wasn't alone anymore. She had never really been alone. Elvis had left breadcrumbs across decades, trusting that the right people would find them at the right time. And now those people were coming together, united by a common purpose. The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later, 6 weeks of preparation, of depositions, of legal maneuvering that made Sarah's head spin. Rachel assembled a team of experts, historians, document analysts, financial investigators. They built a case brick by brick, evidence upon evidence, until the foundation was unshakable. Hayes fought back at every turn. He filed motions to dismiss. He challenged every piece of evidence. He hired his own experts to contradict Sarah's. He did everything in his power to delay, obstruct, and intimidate, but he couldn't stop the trial from happening, and he couldn't stop the truth from coming out. On the morning the trial began, Sarah woke early, her belly now enormous at 8 months pregnant. She had trouble sleeping, trouble finding a comfortable position, trouble thinking about anything except what was about to happen. Maria helped her get dressed. Rachel arrived to drive her to the courthouse. Earl Watson would be there ready to testify. Thomas Garrett was flying in from California. Everyone who had helped her, everyone who believed in her, would be present for the most important day of her life. Are you ready? Rachel asked. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman who had been broken, beaten down, pushed to the edge of despair, but she also saw a woman who had refused to stay down, a woman who had found something extraordinary and chosen to protect it. I'm ready. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat. Elvis fans who had traveled from across the country lined the walls. Television cameras recorded every moment. And at the defendant's table sat Richard Hayes, surrounded by his team of lawyers, his face a mask of confidence. But Sarah saw something else in his eyes, something he was trying to hide. Fear. He was afraid of her, afraid of what she represented, afraid that after 47 years of protecting secrets and controlling narratives, the truth was finally about to come out. Judge Patricia Howard entered, and everyone rose. This court is now in session. The matter before us is Mitchell versus the Elvis Presley estate. Miss Kim, you may proceed with your opening statement. Rachel stood, her posture perfect, her voice clear and strong. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, this case is about more than property rights or estate law. It's about honoring the final wishes of a man who touched millions of lives with his music, his generosity, and his spirit. She walked toward the jury box. Elvis Presley died on August 16, 1977. The official narrative says he died, broke his fortune, squandered on extravagant spending and poor financial management. But that narrative is a lie. She held up a photograph of the vault. For nearly 50 years, this vault sat hidden beneath an abandoned estate containing approximately $200 million in cash, art, and memorabilia. Elvis built it in secret. He filled it in secret. And he left instructions for what should be done with it. Rachel turned to face Richard Hayes. The estate wants you to believe that these assets belong to them, that Sarah Mitchell has no right to what she found. But the evidence will show otherwise. She walked back to her table and placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. The evidence will show that Elvis Presley deliberately hid these assets from his handlers and managers, that he intended them to fund a charitable foundation, and that he left clear instructions for whoever discovered his secret vault. Rachel looked at the jury. Sarah Mitchell didn't steal anything. She found exactly what Elvis wanted someone to find, and she intends to honor his wishes not because it benefits her, but because it's the right thing to do. Hayes' opening statement was everything Sarah expected. He painted her as an opportunist, a fraud, a criminal who had stumbled onto wealth that didn't belong to her. He questioned her character, her motives, her honesty, but his arguments felt hollow, his evidence felt manufactured, and his confidence felt forced. The trial continued for 9 days. Witness after witness took the stand. Earl Watson testified about building the vault, about Elvis's secrecy, about the instructions he had been given. Thomas Garrett presented his research, his interviews, his documentation of Elvis's charitable intentions. The forensic document examiner confirmed the authenticity of every piece of evidence. The financial investigators traced the money in the vault back to Elvis's own accounts. The art appraisers verified the paintings, the memorabilia, the priceless artifacts that had sat in darkness for nearly half a century. And through it all, Sarah sat quietly, her hand on her belly, watching the truth unfold. On the final day, she took the stand. Hayes cross-examined her for 3 hours. He tried to trip her up, to catch her in contradictions, to make her lose her temper. But Sarah remained calm, answering every question honestly and directly. "Miss Mitchell," Hayes said finally, his frustration barely contained, "you expect this court to believe that a dead man somehow chose you, a stranger, to inherit a fortune worth $200 million? Sarah met his eyes. "I don't expect anyone to believe anything. I'm just telling the truth. Elvis left a letter. He said he was saving this fortune for whoever had the courage to look where no one else would. I looked, I found it, and I intend to honor his wishes." How convenient that there's no one alive who can confirm what Elvis actually wanted. There's the letter, there's the journal, there's the testimony of people who knew him. Sarah's voice grew stronger. And there's the fact that he went to extraordinary lengths to hide this vault from people like you, people who would have taken everything and given nothing back. Hayes's face reddened. "I'm going to ask you one more time. Why should anyone believe that you deserve this fortune?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she placed her hand on her enormous belly. "A month ago, I couldn't afford to pay my rent. I was eating 1 meal a day so I could afford prenatal vitamins. I was working double shifts at a laundromat, terrified that my baby would be born into a life of poverty and struggle." She looked at the jury. "I didn't deserve any of this. I still don't. But Elvis didn't ask if I deserved it. He asked if I needed it, and I did, more than I can possibly express." Her voice cracked slightly. "He gave me hope when I had none left. He trusted me with something precious. And I'm not going to betray that trust. Not for money, not for fame, and definitely not because a man like Richard Hayes thinks he's entitled to what doesn't belong to him." The courtroom was silent. Hayes had no more questions. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Sarah waited in a small room with Rachel, Maria, and Earl. She couldn't sit still. She paced back and forth, her back aching, her feet swollen, her mind racing with possibilities. What if they ruled against her? What if Hayes had found a way to poison the jury? What if everything she had fought for was about to be taken away? Maria grabbed her hand. "Stop, you're going to wear a hole in the floor." "I can't help it. I'm terrified." "I know, but whatever happens, you've already won something important." "What?" "You showed the world who you really are, and you showed yourself what you're capable of." The door opened. Rachel's assistant appeared, her face unreadable. "The jury has reached a verdict." Sarah walked back into the courtroom on legs that felt like water. She sat down at the plaintiff's table and folded her hands to keep them from shaking. Judge Howard addressed the jury foreman. "Have you reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. On the matter of ownership of the assets discovered in the vault beneath the Presley estate, how do you find—" The foreman looked directly at Sarah. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Sarah Mitchell." The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Elvis fans cheered. Maria burst into tears. Rachel grabbed Sarah's hand and squeezed hard. Sarah couldn't move. She couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. She had won. After everything, the threats, the break-ins, the forged documents, the criminal accusations, the 9 days of trial, she had won. Judge Howard banged her gavel for order. "The court recognizes the jury's verdict. The assets discovered in the vault are hereby declared the legal property of Sarah Mitchell. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented regarding Elvis Presley's intentions, this court supports the creation of a charitable foundation in accordance with his wishes." She looked directly at Sarah. "Miss Mitchell, you have been entrusted with an extraordinary responsibility. I trust you will honor it." Sarah found her voice. "I will, Your Honor. I promise." Outside the courthouse, the chaos was overwhelming. Reporters surrounded her shouting questions. Cameras flashed. People reached out to touch her, to congratulate her, to share in the moment. But Sarah barely noticed any of it. She was thinking about Elvis, about his letter, about the trust he had placed in a stranger he would never meet. She was thinking about her baby, about the life she could now provide, about the future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. And she was thinking about the work ahead, building the foundation, honoring the legacy, making sure that every dollar went exactly where Elvis had intended. Maria appeared at her side, tears streaming down her face. "You did it! You actually did it!" Sarah hugged her fiercely. "We did it. All of us." Earl Watson pushed through the crowd, his weathered face split by a rare smile. "He'd be proud of you, you know, Elvis. He picked the right person." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I hope so. I really hope so. Rachel joined them, her professional composure finally cracking into genuine emotion. We won. Against all odds, against one of the most powerful legal teams in the country, we won. What happens now? Now we build the foundation. We document the collection. We start doing the good that Elvis always wanted to do. Sarah nodded slowly. Then she felt a sharp pain in her lower abdomen different from anything she had felt before. She gasped, grabbing Maria's arm. Sarah, what's wrong? I think... Another wave of pain hit her. I think the baby's coming. Maria's eyes went wide. Now here. I don't think she cares about timing. Rachel immediately took charge. We need to get her to a hospital, now. The next few hours were a blur of pain and fear and desperate hope. Sarah was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where Elvis had been pronounced dead nearly 50 years ago. The irony was not lost on her. Maria stayed at her side, holding her hand, coaching her through contractions. Rachel made phone calls, handled the media, kept the chaos at bay. And finally, at 11:47 p.m., Sarah's daughter entered the world. She was small but perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and a cry that filled the delivery room with life. The nurse placed her on Sarah's chest, and everything else disappeared. The trial, the vault, the $200 million, Richard Hayes and his threats. None of it mattered. All that mattered was this tiny person, this miracle she had carried through impossible circumstances. Hi, Lily, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mama, and I'm going to give you the best life I possibly can. Lily opened her eyes, dark and curious, and seemed to look directly at her mother. Sarah laughed through her tears. You're going to be something special, I can already tell. Maria appeared at her bedside, her own face wet with emotion. She's beautiful, Sarah. She's absolutely beautiful. She is. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. And she's going to grow up knowing that her mother fought for her, that she didn't give up no matter how hard it got. Outside the hospital window, the Memphis skyline glittered in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Richard Hayes was licking his wounds, planning his next move, refusing to accept defeat. But Sarah wasn't thinking about him. She was thinking about the foundation she would build, the people she would help, the legacy she would honor, and she was thinking about Elvis, who had trusted her with his greatest secret. Thank you, she whispered to the night, for believing in me, for giving me a chance. She held her daughter close and felt for the first time in her life completely at peace. The fight wasn't over. It would never really be over, but tonight she had everything that mattered, and that was more than enough. 3 weeks after Lily was born, Sarah received a phone call that made her blood freeze. Miss Mitchell, this is Detective Cooper. Richard Hayes was found dead in his office this morning. Sarah sat down hard, nearly dropping the phone. Lily stirred in her arms, sensing her mother's sudden tension. Dead how? Apparent suicide, single gunshot wound. He left a note. Sarah's mind raced. Hayes had been her enemy, her tormentor, the man who had tried to destroy her at every turn. But suicide, it didn't fit. Men like Hayes didn't give up. They fought until there was nothing left to fight for. What did the note say? Cooper was quiet for a moment. That's why I'm calling. The note mentioned you. An hour later, Sarah sat in Cooper's office, Rachel beside her, Lily sleeping peacefully in a carrier at her feet. Cooper slid a photocopy across the desk. We found this on his body. Sarah picked it up with trembling hands. I underestimated her. I underestimated all of them. For 40 years, I protected secrets that should have stayed buried. I destroyed lives to keep the truth hidden. And in the end, a pregnant woman with nothing accomplished what no one else could. She found the vault. She won the trial. She exposed everything I spent my career concealing. There's no coming back from this. My reputation is ruined. My career is over. The estate will distance themselves from me to save their own image. I have nothing left. Sarah Mitchell, if you're reading this, know that you beat me. Not with money or power or connections. You beat me with something I never understood. You beat me with truth. I hope it was worth it. Richard Hayes. Sarah read the note 3 times. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. This doesn't make sense, she said quietly. He was vicious, ruthless. He threatened my life. He broke into my property. He tried to have me arrested. Men like that don't write notes about being beaten by the truth. Cooper leaned back in his chair. You think someone else wrote this? No, I think Richard Hayes didn't kill himself. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Sarah, that's a serious accusation. I know what I'm saying. Hayes wasn't suicidal. He was vengeful. If he lost, he would have spent the rest of his life trying to overturn the verdict, finding new angles of attack, making my life miserable. He wouldn't have given up. Cooper studied her for a long moment. We're treating it as a suicide pending investigation, but I'll admit some things don't add up. The timing, for one, and the fact that several files were missing from his office when we arrived. Missing files. Documents related to the Presley estate, things that had been there the day before according to his secretary, gone without a trace. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Someone cleaned up after him. Or before him, Cooper said grimly. Rachel stood. Detective, are you suggesting my client is in danger? I'm suggesting that whatever Hayes was involved in it didn't die with him, and there are people who wanted those files destroyed. People who wanted Hayes silenced. Cooper looked directly at Sarah. You exposed a secret that powerful people wanted kept hidden. Hayes was just the face of that effort. There are others behind him, and now that he's gone, they might decide you're too dangerous to leave alone. Sarah's arms tightened around Lily's carrier. What do I do? For now, be careful. Vary your routine. Don't go anywhere alone. And if anything feels wrong, call me immediately. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in Maria's spare bedroom, Lily in a bassinet beside her, and stared at the ceiling. Hayes's note kept running through her mind. You beat me with truth. But had she, or had she simply become a pawn in a larger game she didn't understand? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Miss Mitchell. The voice was male, unfamiliar, elderly. My name is Walter Graham. I was Richard Hayes's partner for 23 years. Sarah sat up, her heart pounding. How did you get this number? That's not important. What's important is that Richard didn't kill himself. How do you know? Because I spoke to him 2 hours before he died. He was furious about losing the trial, yes. But he wasn't suicidal. He was planning his next move. He said he had information that would change everything. Information about the Presley estate that even you don't know. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of information? I don't know. He wouldn't tell me over the phone. He said it was too dangerous, that there were people listening. Walter's voice dropped. But I do know this, whatever he found, it's the reason he's dead. Who killed him? The same people who have been controlling the Presley estate for 50 years. The people who hired Hayes in the first place. He was just their attack dog. When he failed, they put him down. Who are they? I can't tell you that, not over the phone, but I can meet you. Tomorrow, noon. There's a diner called Rosie's on the east side of Memphis. Come alone. How do I know this isn't a trap? Walter laughed bitterly. You don't. But ask yourself this, if I wanted to hurt you, why would I warn you that Richard was murdered? Why would I offer to give you information that could destroy the people who killed him? He had a point. Sarah's mind raced, weighing risks and possibilities. I'll be there, she said finally. Come alone. And Miss Mitchell trust no one, not even the people you think are on your side. The line went dead. Sarah told Rachel about the call the next morning. Rachel's reaction was immediate. You're not going. I have to. Sarah, this could be a trap. Hayes's people trying to finish what he started. Or it could be the key to everything. Walter said there's information about the estate that even I don't know. What if Hayes found something in that vault that changes everything? What if that's why he was killed? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. If you're determined to do this, you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. He said to come alone? I don't care what he said. Either I come with you or you don't go at all. Sarah knew better than to argue. Rachel's stubbornness had saved her more than once during the trial. Fine, but stay in the car. If Walter sees someone with me, he might bolt. Maria agreed to watch Lily. It was the first time Sarah had been separated from her daughter since the birth, and every instinct screamed at her to stay home, to stay safe, to protect her baby above all else. But she had come too far to stop now. Whatever secrets were still hidden, she needed to find them. Rosie's Diner was a rundown establishment on a street that had seen better decades. Sarah arrived at noon exactly where Rachel waiting in the car half a block away. Inside the diner was nearly empty. A few truckers at the counter, a waitress who looked like she'd been working there since the Eisenhower administration, and in the back booth a man in his 70s with a beard, with white hair and haunted eyes. Walter Graham. Sarah slid into the seat across from him. You came. I said I would. She studied his face. You look scared. I am scared. I've spent 40 years working for people who have no problem eliminating inconveniences. And right now I'm one of those inconveniences. Then why contact me? Walter pulled out a worn leather folder and slid it across the table. Because Richard found something before he died. Something he wasn't supposed to find, and he made a copy before they could destroy it. Sarah opened the folder. Inside were documents she had never seen before. Financial records, bank statements, names and numbers that meant nothing to her. What is this proof, Walter said quietly. Proof that the people controlling the Presley estate have been laundering money through Elvis's legacy for 50 years. Millions of dollars funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. Richard was their enforcer. He kept the secrets buried, intimidated anyone who got too close. But when you found the vault, everything changed. How? Because the vault wasn't supposed to exist. Elvis built it in secret without telling anyone except the construction crew. He hid money and assets that should have been funneled through the estate's accounts. When you discovered it, you exposed a hole in their records. They couldn't explain where those assets came from because they never knew they existed. Sarah's mind raced. So Hayes wasn't just trying to take the vault from me. He was trying to prevent anyone from looking too closely at the estate's finances. Exactly. If investigators started asking questions about the vault, they might start asking questions about everything else. Questions that could bring down the entire operation. Who's behind it? Who's really controlling the estate? Walter's face went pale. I don't know all the names. Richard never told me everything. But I know there's a group of investors who have been profiting from Elvis's legacy since the 1980s. They've placed their people in key positions, controlled every major decision, and eliminated anyone who threatened to expose them. Eliminated. Richard wasn't the first person to die under mysterious circumstances. Over the years, there have been others. People who asked too many questions. People who got too close to the truth. Walter's hands trembled. And now that you've won the trial, you've become the biggest threat of all. Sarah felt ice in her veins. They're going to come after me. Not directly, not at first. They'll try to discredit you again. They'll file appeals, create legal obstacles, drag out the process until you're exhausted and broke. And if that doesn't work... He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah looked down at the documents in her hands. Why are you giving me this? Because I'm tired. I'm 73 years old, and I've spent my entire career protecting people who don't deserve protection. Richard was my friend. He wasn't a good man, but he was my friend, and they killed him like he was nothing. Tears glistened in Walter's eyes. I can't undo what I've done, but maybe I can help you stop them. Maybe that's enough to balance the scales. Now Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand. Thank you. Walter pulled his hand back. Don't thank me yet. Getting this information was the easy part. Using it without getting killed will be much harder. He stood to leave. Wait, Sarah said. How do I contact you? You don't. I'm leaving Memphis tonight. I've said too much already. Just take those documents to someone you trust, someone with resources, someone who can't be bought. Who? Walter was already walking toward the door. That's for you to figure out. He stepped outside and Sarah watched through the window as he climbed into an old sedan and drove away. She looked down at the folder in her hands. The truth, or at least part of it. Now she had to decide what to do with it. Rachel read the documents 3 times before speaking. If this is real, it changes everything. It's real. Walter had no reason to lie. Sarah, do you understand what you're holding? This isn't just evidence of financial crimes. This is evidence of a conspiracy that spans 50 years and involves some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. I know. If you go public with this, they'll destroy you. They'll make the forged documents scandal look like a warm-up. They'll come at you with everything they have. I know that too. So what do you want to do? Sarah looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Her daughter who would grow up never knowing hunger or fear or the crushing weight of poverty. Her daughter who would have every opportunity Sarah had never had. Was she willing to risk all of that for the truth? I want to finish what I started, Sarah said quietly. Elvis didn't just hide money in that vault. He hid from people who wanted to control him, people who treated him like a product instead of a person. And now those same people are trying to control his legacy to profit from his memory while hiding the truth about what they did. She looked at Rachel. I can't let them win. Not after everything I've been through. Not after everything Elvis tried to do. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Then we need to be smart about this. We can't just release these documents to the press. We need verification. We need expert analysis. And we need allies we can trust. Who? I know a federal prosecutor. former law school classmate. She specializes in financial crimes and RICO cases. If anyone can make sense of these documents and protect you while doing it, she can. Can we trust her? I'd trust her with my life. Rachel paused. More importantly, I'd trust her with yours. 2 days later, Sarah met with Assistant United States Attorney Diane Chen in a secure conference room at the federal courthouse. Diane was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with a reputation for taking down organized crime figures and corrupt politicians. She spent 3 hours reviewing the documents Walter had provided. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. This is explosive. If even half of what's suggested here is true, we're looking at one of the largest financial fraud cases in entertainment history. Can you prosecute them? Not based on these documents alone. They suggest wrongdoing, but they don't prove it. We'd need access to the estate's full financial records testimony from insiders and corroborating evidence from independent sources. Sarah's heart sank. So it's useless. I didn't say that. Diane leaned forward. What you've given me is a roadmap. It tells me where to look, who to investigate, what questions to ask. And more importantly, it gives me probable cause to start digging. What do you need from me? Your cooperation, your testimony, and your patience. An investigation like this takes time. Months, maybe years. And it will be dangerous. The people we're talking about don't hesitate to eliminate threats. I know, they already killed Richard Hayes. Diane's eyebrows rose. You believe Hayes was murdered? I'm certain of it, and I'm certain they'll come after me next if they think I'm a threat. Then we need to move carefully. I'm going to assign a protective detail to you and your daughter, unofficially for now. I don't want to tip our hand before we're ready. And when you are ready... Ready? Diane's eyes gleamed with something that might have been anticipation. Then we bring them down, all of them. The months that followed were the hardest of Sarah's life. She worked with Diane's team to build the case, providing testimony, identifying documents, explaining the connections she had discovered. She met with investigators, answered thousands of questions, relived every moment of her journey, from the laundromat to the courthouse. And through it all, she cared for Lily. Her daughter grew quickly, hitting milestone after milestone. First smile, first laugh, first time reaching for her mother's face with tiny, perfect hands. Sarah had moved into a modest house near the estate, close enough to oversee the foundation's work, but far enough from Memphis to feel safe. Maria had come with her, refusing to let her best friend raise a baby alone. You're not getting rid of me that easy, Maria said when Sarah tried to protest. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat. You still forget meals when you're working? The foundation took shape slowly. Rachel brought in experts to catalog the vault's contents, arrange proper preservation, and plan for the museum that would eventually display Elvis's hidden treasures to the world. They started small scholarships for struggling musicians, medical assistance for families who couldn't afford care, arts programs for underserved schools. Each grant was a seed planted a life, changed a promise kept. And every time Sarah signed a check or approved a program or met with someone whose life the foundation had touched, she thought of Elvis. I hope I'm doing this right, she whispered sometimes alone in the mansion that had once been his sanctuary. I hope this is what you wanted. She never received an answer, of course, but somehow she felt like he was listening. 9 months after the trial, the federal investigation became public. Diane Chen held a press conference announcing indictments against 7 individuals connected to the Presley estate, including 3 high-ranking executives who had been laundering money through the organization for decades. The charges included wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Richard Hayes was named as an unindicted co-conspirator, his death officially reclassified as homicide. Sarah watched the press conference from her living room, Lily in her arms, Maria beside her. They did it, Maria breathed. They actually did it. Not yet, Sarah said. This is just the beginning. The trial will take years, and even if they're convicted, there are others who got away, others who will try to rebuild what we've torn down. Always the optimist. Sarah smiled slightly. Just realistic. I've learned that the hard way. Her phone rang. Diane's number. Sarah, are you watching? I'm watching. I wanted you to know that none of this would have happened without you. You're the one who found the vault. You're the one who refused to give up. You're the one who gave us the evidence we needed to bring these people down. Sarah felt tears threatening. I just did what I had to do. You did more than that. You honored a man's legacy in a way no one else could have. Elvis would be proud of you. I hope so. I know so, Diane paused. There's something else. We found additional evidence in the financial records. Evidence that the people we arrested had been planning to destroy the vault if Hayes's legal efforts failed. They were going to burn everything, the money, the art, the memorabilia, all of it, rather than let it become public. Sarah's blood ran cold. They had a team on standby the day before your trial verdict. If you had lost, the vault would have been empty within 12 hours. Sarah held Lily closer. I almost lost everything. But you didn't. You won. And because you won, Elvis's legacy is safe. Forever. After the call ended, Sarah sat in silence for a long time. She thought about everything she had been through. The trailer with no heat. The laundromat shifts. The moment she had signed that deed, not knowing it would change her life forever. She thought about Hayes and his threats about the break-ins and the forged documents and the criminal accusations. She thought about the trial, about standing before the jury and telling her truth. And she thought about Lily, her beautiful daughter, who would grow up knowing that her mother had fought for something that mattered. Mama, Maria's voice broke through her reverie. You okay? Sarah looked at her friend, at the woman who had stood by her through everything. Yeah, she said quietly. I think I finally am. The first anniversary of the trial verdict fell on a crisp October morning. Sarah stood on the steps of the mansion, now fully restored and transformed into the headquarters of the Elvis Presley Charitable Foundation. Behind her, hundreds of people had gathered for the dedication ceremony. Elvis Fans Foundation beneficiaries, local officials, and the small army of supporters who had helped her survive the hardest year of her life. Earl Watson was there, wearing a suit for the first time in decades, his weathered face split by a rare smile. Thomas Garrett had flown in from California, his briefcase full of new research about Elvis's charitable intentions. Rachel Kim stood beside Sarah, her professional composure finally showing cracks of genuine emotion, and Maria held Lily, now a year old, bouncing her gently as the ceremony began. Sarah stepped up to the podium, her heart pounding. A year ago, I was a laundromat worker who couldn't pay her rent. I was pregnant, alone, and convinced that the world had nothing left to offer me. She paused, looking out at the crowd. Then I inherited a deed to an abandoned mansion, and everything changed. She told the story, the discovery, the threats, the trial, the victory. She spoke about Elvis's letter, about his dream of creating something good from his hidden fortune. This foundation isn't mine, she said finally. It belongs to everyone Elvis wanted to help. Every struggling musician who needs a chance. Every family crushed by medical bills. Every child who deserves to know the joy of music and art. She looked at Lily, at her daughter's curious eyes and wondering expression. And it belongs to the future, to the generations who will carry Elvis's legacy forward long after we're gone. Sarah stepped back from the podium. The crowd erupted in applause. That night after the ceremony, after the crowds had dispersed and the cameras had stopped rolling, Sarah walked through the mansion alone. She stopped in the room where she had found the guitar case where her journey had truly begun. The guitar was still there, preserved now behind protective glass. The photograph of young Elvis smiling out at her. I did it, she whispered. I kept my promise. She placed her hand on the glass, feeling the coolness against her palm. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for believing that someone like me could make a difference. The room was silent. Empty, but Sarah could have sworn she felt something, a warmth, a presence, a whisper of approval that might have been her imagination or might have been something more. She smiled. Good night, Elvis. Rest easy. Your legacy is in good hands. She walked out of the room, turning off the light behind her. The mansion settled into darkness, but it was no longer the darkness of abandonment and neglect. It was the darkness of rest, of peace, of a dream finally fulfilled. Outside, the Tennessee stars blazed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, music played, the eternal heartbeat of Memphis carrying Elvis's spirit into the night. Sarah drove home to her modest house where Maria and Lily were waiting. She held her daughter close and looked out the window at the sky. You're going to do amazing things, she whispered. I know you will. Lily reached up and touched her mother's face with tiny fingers. Sarah laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. I love you too, baby girl, more than anything in the world. She had started this journey with nothing. Now she had everything that mattered, and that was more than enough. 5 years passed faster than Sarah ever imagined possible. Lily started kindergarten on a September morning that made Sarah cry in her car for 20 minutes after dropping her off. Her daughter had walked through those school doors with her backpack bouncing, turning to wave with a smile that broke Sarah's heart and healed it at the same time. She's going to be fine, Maria said from the passenger seat, handing her a tissue. You raised a strong kid. I know, that's what scares me. The foundation had grown beyond anything Sarah could have dreamed. In 5 years, they had distributed over $40 million in grants. They had helped 3,000 families pay medical bills. They had funded music programs in 200 schools across the South. They had given scholarships to 500 young musicians who couldn't afford education, and they had turned the mansion into a museum that drew visitors from around the world. Sarah walked through the exhibits every morning before the public hours began, checking displays, adjusting lighting, making sure everything was perfect. The vault had been transformed into a stunning gallery space, Elvis's treasures finally on display for everyone to see. The jumpsuits sparkled behind protective glass. The guitars hung in climate-controlled cases. The Monet and the Warhol and the Picasso drew art lovers who had never cared about rock and roll. But Sarah's favorite exhibit was the smallest one. In a quiet corner of the museum, she had created a memorial to the journey that brought her here. Photographs of her old trailer, a copy of the original deed. Elvis's journal opened to his final entry, and the letter he had left for whoever found his vault. "Trust your heart," the letter said. "It brought you this far. Let it take you the rest of the way." Every day, visitors stopped at that exhibit. They read the letter, they looked at the photographs, and something in their faces changed. A softening, a recognition, a quiet understanding that miracles could happen to ordinary people. That morning, Sarah stood before the exhibit and thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the freezing trailer, and the laundromat shifts, and the morning Maria made her eggs because she couldn't afford to eat. She thought about David Thornton appearing with his manila envelope about the first time she walked up that overgrown driveway and saw the mansion rising from the trees. She thought about Earl Watson and his weathered face about Thomas Garrett, and his decades of research about Rachel Kim and her unshakable confidence. She thought about Richard Hayes and his cold smile about the trial and the verdict and the night Lily was born. She thought about Walter Graham and his secrets about Diane Chen and her investigation about the conspiracy that had finally been exposed and destroyed. And she thought about Elvis, the man who had trusted a stranger with his greatest secret. "Thank you," she whispered as she did every morning, "for everything." The day started normally enough. Sarah conducted a staff meeting at 9, reviewed grant applications at 10, and met with a group of donors at 11. She ate lunch with Maria and Lily, who had a half-day at school, and spent the afternoon finalizing plans for the Foundation's 5th anniversary celebration. At 4 o'clock, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. After 5 years in the public eye, she had learned that important calls often came from unexpected places. "Miss Mitchell, this is Caroline Presley." Sarah's heart stopped. Caroline Presley, Elvis's great-granddaughter. A woman Sarah had never met but had heard about constantly, the young heir, who had distanced herself from the scandal-plagued estate, who had refused to participate in any legal proceedings, who had remained silent throughout everything. "Miss Presley, this is unexpected." "I imagine it is. I've wanted to call you for a long time, but I wasn't sure what to say." Caroline's voice was soft, hesitant. "I'm in Memphis. I was hoping we could meet." "Why?" "Because I owe you an apology, and because there's something you need to know." They met at Rosie's Diner, the same place where Walter Graham had revealed the conspiracy 5 years earlier. Sarah arrived first, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Caroline Presley walked in 10 minutes later. She was in her late 20s, with dark hair and her great-grandfather's eyes. She looked nervous, almost frightened. She slid into the booth across from Sarah and took a deep breath. "Thank you for meeting me." "You said you owed me an apology. For what?" "For staying silent." Caroline's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "When the trial happened, when Richard Hayes was attacking you, when everything was falling apart, I knew the truth. I knew what the estate was really doing, and I said nothing." Sarah felt a flash of anger, then let it go. "Why, fear? My whole life I was told that the family's image came first, that we had to protect the legacy at all costs, that people who asked questions were enemies." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "I was raised to be silent, to look pretty and smile and never ever acknowledge that anything was wrong." "What changed?" "You did." Caroline looked at her directly. "I watched you during the trial. I watched you stand up to Hayes, to the estate, to everyone who tried to destroy you, and I realized that you had more courage than I'd ever had in my entire life." She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather journal. "My grandmother gave me this before she died. She made me promise never to show it to anyone, but I think you need to see it." Sarah took the journal carefully. It was old, the leather cracked and faded. "What is this?" "My great-grandfather's private diary. Not the one you found in the vault. This is different. This one covers the last year of his life, the year he was planning everything." Sarah opened the journal, her hands shaking. The first entry was dated January 1st, 1977. They think they own me, every piece of me, my voice, my face, my name. But they're wrong. I've been planning for years, hiding what I can, protecting what matters, and soon it will all be over, one way or another. Sarah looked up at Caroline. He knew he was going to die. He was sick, much sicker than anyone admitted publicly. He knew he didn't have much time left. Caroline's voice cracked. Keep reading. Sarah turned the pages, scanning entries that grew increasingly desperate. The Colonel is watching everything. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. Every dollar I earn, he takes his cut. Every decision I make, he controls. But he doesn't know about the vault. He doesn't know about the tunnel. That's mine. The only thing that's truly mine. And then an entry from August 1977, just days before Elvis died. I finished the letter today, the one I'll leave in the vault. I don't know who will find it. Maybe no one ever will. But I had to try. I had to believe that someday, somehow the right person would come along. Someone who needed help the way I needed help when I was young and hungry and nobody. Someone who would understand why I did what I did. Sarah's eyes blurred with tears. He talks about you, Caroline said quietly. Not by name, obviously, but he describes the person he hoped would find the vault. A woman, struggling, alone. Someone the world had given up on. That's impossible. He died before I was born. I know, but read the last entry. Sarah turned to the final page. I dreamed about her last night. The woman who will find the vault. She was young, dark-haired, pregnant. She was standing in the mansion holding my guitar, crying. And I knew that I had chosen right. She will honor my wishes. She will do what I couldn't do. She will make it all mean something. Sarah dropped the journal. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold it. That's not possible, she whispered. He couldn't have known. I don't understand it either, Caroline said. But that's what he wrote. 2 weeks before he died, he described you exactly. A pregnant woman standing in the mansion holding his guitar. Sarah remembered that moment, the first time she had explored the house, finding the guitar case in the bedroom, lifting the photograph with trembling hands. She had been pregnant. She had been crying. And Elvis had seen it somehow, decades before it happened. Why are you showing me this? Sarah asked. Because you deserve to know that you weren't an accident. You weren't just lucky. Elvis chose you. Somehow, in some way I don't understand, he reached across time and chose you to be the guardian of his legacy. Caroline took her hand. And because I want to help, the estate is a mess. The people who were arrested left everything in chaos. But I'm the heir. I have power even if I've never used it. And I want to use it now to support the foundation to honor what my great-grandfather really wanted. Sarah stared at her, unable to speak. I know I don't deserve your trust, Caroline continued. I've been a coward my whole life, but you showed me that it's never too late to stand up for what's right. You showed me that one person can make a difference even against impossible odds. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Please let me help. Please let me be part of something good. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then she squeezed Caroline's hand. Welcome to the family. The news of Caroline Presley's involvement exploded across media within hours. The headlines wrote themselves, Elvis Heir Joins Foundation Pledges Full Support for Sarah Mitchell's Vision. Reporters clamored for interviews. Television networks offered exclusive deals. The story that had captivated the world 5 years ago roared back to life. But Sarah wasn't interested in the media circus. She was focused on what Caroline's support actually meant: access to the estate's remaining archives' influence over the organization's future direction and, most importantly, legitimacy. For 5 years, critics had questioned Sarah's right to control Elvis's legacy. They called her an outsider, an opportunist, someone who had stumbled onto wealth she didn't deserve. Caroline's endorsement silenced those voices. You belong here, Caroline said during a joint press conference, more than anyone in my family ever did. My great-grandfather's dream was to help people who were struggling. Sarah Mitchell has done exactly that. I'm honored to support her work. The 5th anniversary celebration became something more than anyone had planned. Thousands of people gathered on the grounds of the Mansion Elvis fans who had traveled from around the world, families who had been helped by the foundation musicians whose careers had been launched by scholarships and grants. A stage had been set up near the entrance, and throughout the day performers took turns honoring Elvis's legacy with music that ranged from rock and roll to gospel to country to blues. Sarah watched from the side of the stage, Lily at her side. Mama, why are all these people here? Because they believe in something special, baby. They believe that music and kindness can change the world. Did Elvis believe that... Sarah looked at her daughter, 5 years old, now curious and bright, with no memory of the trailer or the struggle or the fear. Yes, he did, and he was right. Late in the afternoon, Sarah was called to the stage. She walked up slowly, overwhelmed by the size of the crowd, by the cameras flashing, by the weight of everything this moment represented. She stood at the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. 5 years ago, I was nobody. A pregnant woman who couldn't pay her rent, who worked at a laundromat for minimum wage, who had given up on ever having a better life. The crowd was silent, listening. Then I inherited a deed to an abandoned property and everything changed. But not in the way you might think. The money didn't save me. The fame didn't save me. What saved me was discovering that someone believed in me before I believed in myself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Elvis Presley hid his treasures in a vault for almost 50 years. He left a letter explaining why he wanted to help people who were struggling, people who needed a second chance, people the world had given up on. And somehow, impossibly, he chose me to find it. She looked at Caroline standing at the side of the stage. I've spent 5 years trying to honor that trust. We've helped thousands of families. We've funded hundreds of programs. We've given opportunities to people who never thought they'd have any. Her voice grew stronger. But this isn't about me. It was never about me. This is about what we can accomplish when we believe in each other, when we refuse to give up, when we trust that even in the darkest moments light can break through. She looked at Lily, at Maria, at Earl and Thomas and Rachel, all the people who had stood by her. Elvis's legacy isn't the money or the music or the fame. His legacy is this, the belief that one person can make a difference, that kindness matters, that dreams are worth fighting for. She stepped back from the microphone. Thank you, all of you, for believing with me. The applause was deafening. That night, after the celebration ended and the crowds dispersed, Sarah walked through the mansion alone. She stopped in the vault, now transformed into the museum's centerpiece. The shelves that had once held hidden treasures now held memories. Photographs of people the foundation had helped, letters from grateful families, stories of lives changed. Sarah touched one of the photographs. A young mother with 3 children saved from bankruptcy by the foundation's medical assistance program. She had written, "You gave me my life back. I'll never be able to thank you enough." There were hundreds of stories like that, thousands, each one a testament to what Elvis had dreamed of creating, each one a promise kept. Sarah heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eye. "Mama, what are you doing?" "Just thinking, baby. Come here." Lily patted over and Sarah lifted her up, settling her on her hip. "Do you see all these pictures?" Lily nodded. "These are people we've helped, people who were struggling just like Mama used to struggle. And because of what we do here, their lives are better now." Lily studied the photographs with serious eyes. "Why did you help them?" "Because someone helped me once. Someone I never met who believed in me before I believed in myself. And when someone gives you a gift like that, you don't keep it for yourself. You pass it on." "Is that why you started the foundation?" "That's exactly why." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at her mother. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "You will, baby. I know you will." She carried Lily out of the vault through the mansion that had once been dark and abandoned and forgotten. Now it blazed with light, with life, with hope, and it would continue to blaze long after Sarah was gone. 10 years after she first walked through the rusted gate, Sarah stood on the porch of the mansion and watched the sunset over Tennessee. So much had changed. Lily was 10 now, tall for her age, with her mother's determination and a kindness that seemed to come from somewhere beyond either of them. Maria had retired from the laundromat years ago and now ran the foundation's volunteer program, organizing the thousands of Elvis fans who contributed their time and energy. Earl Watson had passed away peacefully in his sleep at 89, but his memory lived on in a scholarship named after him, supporting young people from rural Tennessee who wanted to study construction and engineering. Thomas Garrett had written 3 more books about Elvis, including one dedicated entirely to the vault and its discovery. Rachel Kim had become one of the most sought-after estate attorneys in the country, though she still handled the foundation's legal work personally. Caroline Presley had become Sarah's closest ally in managing Elvis's legacy, using her influence to heal the wounds left by decades of corruption and neglect, and the foundation had grown into something extraordinary. Over 10 years, they had distributed more than $100 million. They had helped 15,000 families. They had funded programs in 500 schools. They had given scholarships to 2,000 young musicians. They had built something that would outlast them all. Sarah heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Lily approaching. Mama, the board meeting is about to start. I know, baby. I'll be there in a minute. Lily came to stand beside her, looking out at the sunset. You always come here before meetings. It helps me remember why we do this, why it matters. Do you ever miss it, the way things used to be? Sarah laughed softly. The trailer with no heat, the cold bus rides to the laundromat, eating one meal a day because I couldn't afford more. I guess not. No, baby, I don't miss any of that. Sarah put her arm around her daughter. But I'm grateful for it, because that life taught me what matters. It taught me that you don't need money to be rich. You need love. You need purpose. You need people who believe in you. Like Maria and Earl and Rachel. Like all of them. And like you. Sarah kissed the top of Lily's head. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You know that. You tell me every day. Because it's true every day. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Then Lily spoke again. Mama, do you think Elvis really saw you in his dream, I mean? Before you were born. Sarah thought about the journal Caroline had shown her. About the entry describing a pregnant woman standing in the mansion holding his guitar. I don't know, baby, but I know that something brought me here, something I don't understand. Call it fate, call it destiny, call it whatever you want, but it wasn't an accident. So he really did choose you. Maybe, or maybe I chose myself. Maybe I just refused to give up when everyone told me to. Maybe the only magic was believing that things could get better. Lily considered this. I think it was both. I think he reached out and you reached back, and you met somewhere in the middle. Sarah stared at her daughter, amazed as always by the wisdom that seemed to live inside her. When did you get so smart? I learned from the best. They walked back into the mansion together, mother and daughter, past the exhibits and the photographs and the letter that had started everything. Trust your heart. It brought you this far. Let it take you the rest of the way. Sarah had trusted her heart, and it had led her here. 20 years later, Sarah stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Elvis Presley Museum, looking out at a crowd that included celebrities, politicians, scholars, and most importantly, the people whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's work. She was 63 years old now. Her hair had gone gray. Her face carried the lines of laughter and tears and all the years between, but her eyes still blazed with the same fire that had carried her through poverty and threats and trials and triumphs. Lily stood beside her 30 years old, beautiful and brilliant, preparing to take over leadership of the Foundation. 25 years ago, Sarah began, I walked into an abandoned mansion, pregnant and terrified, and certain that I had nothing left to lose. I found a guitar in an upstairs bedroom, a journal hidden under the floorboards, a tunnel leading to a vault that had been sealed for almost 50 years. She paused, letting the memories wash over her. But what I really found was something much more valuable than money. I found a purpose. I found a calling. I found proof that one person's dreams can outlast their lifetime and change the world. She looked at Lily. Today I'm stepping back from my role as chairman of the Foundation, not because I'm tired or ready to give up. Those of you who know me know I never give up. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I'm stepping back because it's time for the next generation to carry this forward. My daughter Lily will be taking over as chairman, and I know with absolute certainty that she will honor Elvis's vision even better than I have. Lily stepped forward, her eyes bright with emotion. When I was 5 years old, she said, I asked my mother why she helped people. She told me that someone had helped her once, someone who believed in her before she believed in herself. And when someone gives you a gift like that, you don't keep it for yourself. You pass it on. She looked at Sarah. Mama, you've spent 25 years passing that gift on. You've changed more lives than anyone can count. You've built something that will last forever. And you've taught me everything I need to know about courage, kindness, and the power of never giving up. Her voice cracked. I promise you, I promise everyone in this room, and I promise Elvis Presley wherever he is, I will honor this legacy with everything I have. Sarah pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, tears streaming down both their faces. The crowd rose to their feet, applauding, many of them crying as well. And in that moment, Sarah felt something she had felt only once before in the vault all those years ago when she had first read Elvis's letter and understood the gift she had been given. Peace. Complete, perfect peace. She had done what she set out to do. She had honored a dead man's wishes. She had built something beautiful from something that had been hidden in darkness. And now she could let go. After the ceremony, Sarah walked through the museum one last time. She stopped at every exhibit, touching the glass, remembering the moments each one represented. The guitar case where it all began, the photograph of young Elvis laughing in the sun, the letter that had changed her life, and finally the wall of photographs showing everyone the foundation had helped over 25 years. Thousands of faces, thousands of stories, thousands of lives changed. Sarah looked at them all, and she smiled. "I did my best," she whispered. "I hope it was enough." And then so softly she might have imagined it, she heard a voice. It was more than enough. She spun around, but she was alone. The room was empty, but somehow she knew she had heard it. A voice from somewhere beyond thanking her for keeping a promise made half a century ago. "Thank you," she whispered back, "for believing in me." The room was silent, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of music and memories and love that transcended time, full of dreams that had finally come true. Sarah walked out of the museum into the warm Tennessee night. Lily was waiting for her along with Maria and Rachel and Caroline and all the people who had become her family over the years. "Ready to go home, Mama?" Lily asked. Sarah looked back at the mansion one last time. The windows glowed with warm light. The music still played softly from inside. And somewhere in that light and music, Elvis Presley's spirit rested peacefully, knowing that his legacy was in good hands. "Yes, baby," Sarah said, taking her daughter's arm. "I'm ready." They walked away together, leaving the mansion behind, stepping into a future filled with possibility and hope, and the unshakable belief that dreams are worth fighting for. Because that was the truth Sarah had learned. That was the truth Elvis had hidden in his vault, waiting for someone to find it. That was the truth she would carry with her for the rest of her days. Anyone can change the world if they are willing to honor the past fight for what is right and trust that sometimes broken-down mansions hold miracles. And sometimes, if you are brave enough to step into the darkness, you find that the light was waiting for you all along. Sarah Mitchell had started her journey with nothing. She ended it with everything that mattered, and that was the greatest treasure of all.